Hello everyone, and welcome back once again to another edition to my One Piece journey. Today we're going to be talking about the arc that everyone has been hyping up, everyone's been talking about, the Water 7 arc, and might I add, it's been getting hyped up for good reason. This will be part 1 of my Water 7 review, which will encapsulate chapters 322 up until and including chapter 349. Just a reminder, if you'd like to see the next video review, you can do so by heading over to my Patreon and subscribing at the tier for which you can get early access. That would be tier 2. And if you're interested in which arc or section of the story my next video covers, I will always have that in the comments, in the pinned comment next to my Patreon link, if you're ever curious, if you want to know, oh yes, I want to see this right now, or if you're like, I can kind of wait a little bit, it's up to you, and I'll be telling you in the pinned comment what the next video will cover. Not that that information is very difficult to parse out for yourself, especially if you've read the story before or watched the story before, but just so you guys know. If you'd like to follow me on Twitch, where every single chapter I read will be read live on stream, you can do so by following me using the links in the description and pinned comment. Lately it's been really great. It's been a lot of people showing up, a lot of people sharing their enthusiasm for these arcs, and thank you guys for that. Long may it continue. And join in if you'd like. You can also join the Discord server if you're interested in that sort of thing, and discussions and any of that stuff. But before jumping into Water 7, as always, we will be talking about some AJ Piece comments. The ones for this one were from the Skypiea Part 2 video, so a lot of them are prevalent to that arc. The first comment is from Jimmy Ichigo, who says, Skypiea as a whole is the arc most defining of One Piece's romanticism, a kingdom in the clouds being a symbol of dreams, and Luffy showing it off to the world to show that it exists and dreams are there for anyone who wants to pursue them and reap the rewards. It all coalesces so well and fits perfectly, and I definitely agree that it's the most cohesive saga. One question, other future arcs are agreed upon to be better than Skypiea, but do you think that they will be able to come together in quite this way? I love the way that this comment describes Skypiea. Skypiea is really just built a little bit different, you know? Something about the setting and what it means with regards to dreams and adventures and journeys and all of that, what it represents, how it looks just aesthetically, what the conclusion is. It all just hits a little bit different. It's almost like a little bit of a fairy tale almost. A kingdom in the clouds being a symbol of dreams in and of itself, Luffy's silhouette. It's all just very fairy tale-esque in a way, and quite beautiful, and the moral is very, you know, all-encompassing and encouraging as well. And yeah, the most cohesive saga so far, for sure, like I mentioned in that video. But as for the question, you say that other arcs in the future are agreed upon to be better than Skypiea, which is great to hear. If I end up agreeing with that, we are going to have some arcs that I love, because you guys saw how much I enjoyed Skypiea. But with regards to that, you saying that other arcs are agreed upon to be better generally by the consensus, but do I think that it will come together in quite the same way? All the elements, all the integrative elements, plot, thematics, character, the overall spirit and tone, what it's been building up to, all of that, it coalesces in that beautiful moment where Luffy rings the bell and it echoes out everywhere throughout the land. That is just unique, the way that all comes together. It is just unique. You know, this was just special. Can it be captured again? A lot of things have to fall into place for that. But Oda's done it once, and lots of people seem to say Skypiea's a good arc, very good arc, but there are a handful that are better than it. So, listen, you guys have not really led me wrong so far. Not that I'm hyping it up for myself or that I'll be disappointed if it isn't an 11 out of 10 or something like that, but I think that's done with good reason, and Oda's done it here. So, lightning in a bottle can be captured multiple times from the same writer. So I have faith that it can happen again for sure. Blue Blazer says that something I really enjoy about the NL fight on the Maxim is how aspects of the world building of Skypiea are integrated, I guess, in neat little ways. Enel has no concept of gold. He does not understand that it has value in the way that we do. To him, it's precious because it conducts electricity, and in the same way, he has no concept of rubber, and he could never even have conceived of such a thing existing. I like this a lot because thematically this sort of exposes the all-knowing God as being so thoroughly ignorant of the wider world. Another thing I like, which is mostly likely just in my head and unintentional, but nonetheless, we as readers are sort of tricked into becoming haters and doubters of NL's dream due to our own real-world knowledge making us biased. NL wants to build a Zeppelin and fly to the moon with it. Clearly he's crazy and this will never work, right? But maybe we shouldn't so easily dismiss this. We should instead dismiss his dream for the means by which he aims to achieve it, but that's a different topic. Two really good points there, or the two that I really want to respond to most. Yeah, totally. I love Enel being this god who is so fixated on the goings-ons of Skypiea, so much so that he snipes anyone who slanders him. So much so that he needs to know everything that's going on and has this oppressive, dictatorial rule over everything that's going on, and he is all-knowing in that way. But with regards to the wider scope of the world, if you extrapolate a little bit, the reason that Luffy and company are so different from him, not in necessarily the dreaming aspect, but the way they go about it. Enel is just living with tunnel vision. He so clearly doesn't know what's going on, and I think he's aware of that to a certain extent for sure. I think he admitted as much during the arc, but his lack of awareness of rubber and the nature of gold, like you say there, all these sorts of things that are common sense for people who just have more knowledge, not smarts necessarily, but more knowledge and experience and a broader perspective. He is just so ignorant, and that is so important for sort of undercutting the all-knowing God concept that might have been associated with him otherwise, but shows itself to be a sham. And I like that second point a lot as well, of us, the readers, maybe not necessarily you or me specifically, but just in general, that's the inclination of a reader, is to look at Enel's dream and go, fly to the moon? Come on. And dismiss it. But why? It's not impossible. Definitely not in this world, especially given that we've seen some improbable, impossible dreams, seemingly impossible, but improbable dreams, be achieved and be continued to be pursued in a way that makes you think that they can be achieved. So there is no logical reason, ironically, in the world of One Piece to dismiss Enel's dreams. And it is not the fact that he's a dreamer or that he has this dream that seems to be impossible that you should dismiss it or dismiss him. It's because of the methods in which he enacts these things. And how he's so cruel and oppressive and awful. Just my opinion says some say that Baratie is where they fell in love with One Piece, others say Arlong, some say Alabasta. But this for me was the moment where I went, yup, this is it. This is a series I'll love for life. The way everything coalesces and comes together is just so masterful, culminating with the bell ring that encapsulates everything. I'm not saying that this moment had to mean all that for you, but I do know from streams that you loved it. Is there anything that you'd compare it to, and if so, what? I think it's unique. Also, a bonus, you just said in today's stream that Oda's biggest strength is his payoff and coalescing moments, so just want to drop this in here for you to nod to it if this gets selected. This was actually a really good question asked to me on stream. What do you think Oda's greatest strength is? And my opinion on this has kind of shifted. My answer at chapter 20 would be different from chapter 50, would be different from chapter 200. And I think it's different now, having read well past chapter 300, 350. And my answer would be this, essentially payoff. There are lots of little things that go into this, but the answer for me would be Oda is, so far, a master at payoff. The world building is quite substantial and good. You guys know that I enjoy that. The character writing, you guys know I really enjoy that. The themes, I talk so much about the themes and the character writing and all that stuff. But if I had to hone in on one thing that Oda really strikes me as impressive at maybe a master at, it would be payoffs and moments, and how themes and plot elements and tone and atmosphere and character moments all coalesce in these moments in these arcs. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. We just had Skypiea. So the ending of Skypiea, everyone praying, Luffy ringing the bell, and then we see his silhouette going over to Cricket. That's what I'm talking about. Such an encapsulation and coalescing of so many elements, and beautiful payoff for everything that had been building since Jaya and some other things since the beginning of the series. Baratie, amazing payoff for the few things we know about Zoro. Arlong Park, amazing payoff for all the stuff, the moment specifically, Nami begging Luffy, please help me. Such a build-up for her. Water 7, we're gonna be talking about Water 7. There are some amazing moments, individual moments for characters like Usopp and Robin that have been building for chapters and chapters that Oda just shows payoff for in such a skilled way. Another great one is the ending of Drum Island. You guys know I love that one. And another one is the ending of Alabasta, the arms with Vivi. And I wouldn't be AJ, I wouldn't be YouTube user Alexander if I didn't mention the end of Syrup Village. Usopp leaving Syrup Village and that spread. And it all encapsulated in that moment in his backstory about his father and why he lies and all that stuff. Oda is so good at those moments, and that, more than anything, is what I think I take away as the greatest strength. It's the thing I look forward to the most in One Piece, in seeing how he's able to reach these moments with very meticulous planning. You can't reach them by rushing to anything. You have to have deliberate build-up. You have to be patient in some ways, but you're so rewarded if you invest yourself and immerse yourself. What can I say? That's my favorite strength of Oda's. And as for if there's anything I'd compare Skypiea to, other than the bits of JRPGs, fantastical settings from JRPGs I've talked about, some parallels to Xenoblade, Final Fantasy, in some elements, you guys know what I mean, I've talked about that in the videos. No, I can't say I've read or watched or played anything quite like Skypiea. Chili Ice Cream says, I believe one of the reasons why Luffy is the perfect protagonist for this series honestly lies in how simplistic he is. No matter how complex the plot of an arc can get, and believe me, they can get very complex, you can always reorient yourself by focusing on Luffy and how he intends to solve the problem at hand. This simplistic nature is also translated to his design, which often seems comparatively plain when compared to other side characters or the villains, which acts to reinforce the strength of its convictions via how he acts rather than seeming impressive. It's honestly so refreshing when compared to other series that get needlessly bogged down in the details and relentless self-seriousness. I agree. That is something that I've tried to get across in videos, but maybe haven't communicated as well as this comment does. The series has consistently gotten more and more complex when it comes to plot. Alabasta is very dense politically, and comparing it to something like Syrup Village, which you guys know I really enjoy, but the plot is just much simpler in Syrup Village. And then comparing that to like Water 7, it gets more and more dense and there are more and more moving pieces, more and more variables, and it can get overwhelming at times, especially for someone like me, I'm not gonna lie, especially for someone like me who has to write down notes of these plot elements and keep them, very on track in my head, and try my best not to forget stuff, even though I obviously do forget some things and make mistakes. But it can get overwhelming, and it's not because it's poorly written, it's just there's a lot of stuff, and that's the type of story this has become. One where there are lots of plot elements and lots of things going on. But what I love about that is, like you say, you can reorient yourself by just focusing on Luffy's perspective, what his goal is, and how it kind of dominoes and cascades to those surrounding him, and the plot, and the themes. And at any time during this whole journey so far, where I felt, okay, what is actually going on in the plot? What do I need to talk about in this video? What do I really want to dig into? I always do think of Luffy, and what his goal was, what he was trying to achieve, and what he did, and the effect it had on the plot. And just doing that helps you remember, right, that's this is that, and this is what's going on in this arc, and this is what Oda's saying here. And it's beautifully designed in that way. I love me some existential crisis, very edgelord protagonist, but in a series like this, it wouldn't have fit at all. You need someone like Luffy. You need someone with his disposition and his, he grows a lot. He grows a ton in subtle ways, but nonetheless remains very simple at heart in a lot of ways, and I think that is so necessary for getting a sense of place, for understanding and reorienting yourself. So yeah, great point. Then Jean Asavio Danois says, Skypiea is my favorite arc in One Piece and I'm happy to see you liked it. How do you feel about Enel being the first villain to achieve his goal, and do you think the moon might have a greater importance in the future of One Piece? Yes, I do feel the moon will be very important in the future of One Piece. That spread of Enel reaching the moon and essentially achieving his dream, it being an encapsulation of a dream fulfilled, which, is not something that can be said about a lot of our protagonists so far. Their dreams are being fulfilled through the ways in which they try to carry out their dreams, but their actual end goals have not been reached yet. Enel's was here, and so I think there's a lot of potential for setting up something between someone who achieved his dream and other dreamers, and differing ways and nuances for how you can pursue those things, and the ways in which that can be productive, and the ways in which that can be beneficial for the world around you and the people around you, and the ways in which it can be awful. I have a prediction that Enel is going to be part of another major arc in the future. I'm not really going out on much of a limb, because I think Oda made it very deliberate. There's just such an importance in that plot element that he makes it there. There's such weight in that spread. And so I definitely think we're going to see him again, perhaps as another major antagonist for another major arc. And I'm glad. I think there are a lot of interesting elements to Enel that didn't necessarily get explored to the greatest degree, but that have potential and can really elevate him even more as a character. So I'd love to see more of him, and I'd love to see what Oda has planned for him. And I do think we'll see him again, and we'll see the moon again. I don't know if we're going to travel to the moon or anything like that, but in some way I do think it's going to play a factor. And I'd say thematically even more so than plot-wise, for the reasons I just described before. And I really like that he's the one who really achieved his goal, because it is, like I said, in essence the same goal, a very similar goal as the crew. And that in itself is so interesting to then foil with Luffy and the rest of the crew to see where he goes and how he carries out things, and to explain and communicate a lot of themes and messages with regards to the nuances of these dreams, because these sorts of ideas that have been introduced through One Piece can be deconstructed in really interesting ways, and I think NL forms the foundation for that potentially. We'll see. I could be just totally off base and none of this ends up happening, but I find that very enticing. The next one's a very interesting one from Kale Vilenius? Apologies, I think I mispronounced. The storyline of Skypiea begins with a fake quote from an in-universe scientist, the physicist Willie Caron, as a ship falls from the sky. The mystery of the ship falling from the sky, the log post pointing up, the giant shadows, what happened to the city of Shandora, and even the very existence of islands in the sky are all given scientific, rational explanations. Oda is very much showing us that science is there to help us find the real Shandorans, to find the real answer, where the superstitions of the Shandorans or the dismissive arrogance of the pirates in Mocktown offer nothing. When Noland and Kalgara have their opposing views meet, it's not a compromise they reach. Noland's views are correct, and Kalgara comes to see that the illness is not a curse and that the snake is not a god. Science leads to truth, superstition does not. The scientific mindset is deeply rooted in One Piece. Just look at the crew, their dreams. Nami wants to chart the world, Sanji wants to discover the All Blue, Chopper wants to cure all diseases, Robin wants to learn about the truth of the Void Century. All of these people are on a quest to increase the collective knowledge of all humanity. They are agents of progress. Nolan was himself a botanist as well as an explorer. The Shandorans guarded not the gold of their city but the Poneglyph. They were charged with being keepers of knowledge. Even Enel's fate turns out different from that of previous arc villains because of this. Rather than being taken down and losing all he hoped to gain, Enel is allowed to continue on his way to the moon. Why? Because by doing so, he is advancing the pursuit of knowledge and progress. Compare this to Werner von Braun, who's completely forgiven for making the V2 rockets because of his later contributions to space travel. Despite all of its fantastical elements, One Piece is a science fiction story at heart. Now, this is a really interesting comment, and I think it's very important, not because I agree with it, because there are a few things I don't really agree with in this comment, but because it's such an interesting point of view. And like we've talked about before in videos, two or multiple people can come up with such differing views on the same story, and all of it can be valid. I totally understand why someone would think this way. Like I said, I wouldn't agree with some of the little details in the sentences there about some of the thematics and what we can take away from some of the character journeys. My mind tends to go in some different directions, but nonetheless, I think this is a very interesting point of view. I think I'd let the story play out more if I were to conclude about whether it's science fiction or if it's fantasy. Personally for me, just going off nothing but subjective feeling, One Piece is a fantasy to me, but you cannot say that it doesn't have huge bases in science fiction elements, and so I can totally understand why someone would hold this point of view, and I think it's really great, and I'm glad that it's been shared with me, so thank you for sharing this point of view, and I'm sure that there are plenty others who agree. As for me, it's a sort of thing that I have to sort of keep an eye on or keep in the back of my mind as I read more of the story and see how I feel about the genre and the thematic trappings and all of that. And the last one is from Joki or Yoki. I'm so glad that you like the Sky Island story. It's my favorite arc personally. I just love the themes and structure. NL is one of my favorite villains, and it's not just because of his cool power. Restarting his heart is so raw. NL is, I think, a great contrast to a number of previous villains and maybe some future ones. You've noted how so many of the adversaries we've encountered so far are fountains of cynicism, from East Blue to Baroque Works to Jaya, but NL is different. He's not cynical. He does not mock the dreamers, because he himself has his dream, to reach the mythical endless Verth. He does not look down on the people around him because they have stupid ideas like Bellamy did in Jaya, but instead it seems to me like it's the opposite, that he looks down on simple people, the regular populace, because they don't have dreams. Remember, he was totally willing to have the last 5 contestants join him on his journey. It was not supposed to be a one-man trip. He treats his opponents with more respect than he does his subjects, because at least his enemies are putting themselves out there. I think this represents the sort of opposite of what Bellamy was, which was the negativity of denying the dream. NL shows, in my view, the potential for destruction that big dreams can have, the chaos which can be left in its wake. The difference between NL and Luffy is not that NL lacks the dream or drive like Bellamy. The difference is that NL lacks the humanity, the care and compassion, and empathy, which has allowed the crew's dreams to have a positive impact. But then, of course, that's the difference. NL is a kami, not a human, as he is so eager to remind us. And this covers a point that I think is very important that I've tried to stress as well. It's a great comment to sort of wrap up this NL Skypiea discussion. discussion. What you say here, NL shows the destruction in having a dream when someone does not have care and compassion and all of that. I think this is great for two reasons. One, it feeds into that ongoing narrative, thematic narrative that Oda has had about leaders and rulers, them having heart and care and compassion and empathy for their subjects and for people in general. This is something I've talked about for arcs and arcs and arcs. It's been there for a while, and it's carried forward with NL, and that being the key difference between him and Luffy. Not that he doesn't have dreams, because he is actually a thematic antithesis in some ways to Bellamy. So that's not the message here. It goes back to that idea of rulers, and that's what I really like about it, these thematic through lines that get carried out throughout the series, and some characters conflict with other ones, like NL conflicting with Bellamy, but then through that difference between them and the protagonist, you can be informed about other things, and some it remains consistent with them, like this heartfelt, empathetic ruler one. So I really like that. NL is in a lot of ways an example of how Oda uses theming long term. But something else you mentioned here is something I mentioned earlier for the potential of NL being in a future arc. The difference being that he represents the destruction that can be left in its wake when you pursue a dream in the way that he does in comparison to how Luffy does. So I really like that Skypiea in itself sort of dwells on that idea. But I do think that the story has potential to explore it further, and we'll see where that goes. Thank you guys so much. This was a bit of a longer segment for AJP's comments. Not sure if it'll come out like that in the video, but I did talk a lot because you guys gave me some great ones, so thank you for sharing. If you'd like your comment to be added to the pool of AJP's comments that I might read out in a future video, just be sure to use the hashtag AJP's. But here we finally are, Water 7. As is the case with a lot of part 1s for longer arcs, I don't have conclusions to make just yet about some of the themes that have been presented, but there have been a lot of ideas presented, a lot of which I find very emotional in their execution and very well done. And they were executed in ways that really affected me emotionally and intellectually. You know, lots of thought food. So there are lots of themes here. Obviously, we'll tackle them in more depth as we go through the chronological review, but there is the burden of being captain, which may have just been amusing, that could have been concluded when it did get concluded, or maybe that'll be addressed more in the future, I don't know. But the burden of being captain, specifically for Luffy, the burdens of leadership in some ways, I think is dwelt upon to a great degree, and also dwelt upon through Iceberg in some ways as well. And then this arc, oh god, you guys must have been really kind of chuckling at me knowing what was to come, and the Usopp focus that would be in this arc, because the Usopp focus is amazing. It is everything I wanted from this character. It is, dare I say, like near perfect. But he is a huge part of this thematically and in terms of the plot, and so there is the ideas of his weakness and then his form of strength, his specific brand of strength. So that's a very important idea that's sort of tackled here as well, and also the idea of bonds being severed, being broken. Will they be able to withstand storms, metaphorical storms? In what contexts can they withstand those sort of storms? Families being fractured. You know, we have the Straw Hats who are torn apart in multiple ways here. We have the Gali Law Company, the Gali Law crew, Paulie and his friends, and how they're torn apart. And the difference is there, because there's a big difference between what happens to Paulie and Gali Law and what happens to the Straw Hats. I think, personally, the departures of Usopp and Robin offer quite a bit more hope than the departures of Lucci and all of them. And I think the differences between them can really inform you about a lot of the things that Oda's trying to say, and a lot of the importance of the bonds between these Straw Hats. The reason that Usopp leaves isn't because he genuinely is so different from Luffy, or is not worthy, or any of that. It is because of different reasons that are much more character-focused, that we'll get into. Robin's as well. There's betrayal in multiple ways, that's a huge theme in this arc, and the nuances of it. And then there's also, arguably maybe the biggest theme, this idea of power. The idea of harnessing a thing so powerful that it shouldn't belong in anyone's hands. Can power truly be harnessed? Can your creations, if they have the potential to be dangerous, should they be wielded by you? Should they be wielded at all? And should you have pride in the things that you want to pursue, whether they be your own inventions, you know, we have that through Frankie and stuff like that, whether they be something you want to discover, we have that through Robin. Should you have pride in those sorts of things if they can be dangerous, or should they just be eradicated from the Earth because they are dangerous? That is something that Iceberg believes, that is something that the CP9 believe, the government believe, and that is something that Tom sort of goes against. And that is something that Frankie's not really sure about, but ultimately makes a conclusion about. Should you be able to have pride in these things? Should you harness them? Tom, who ends up being a very inspirational character, says, have pride in these things. A ship, for example, in that context, is neither good nor bad. It depends on who wields it. Same with the power that Robin is trying to get to. But Iceberg thinks differently, the government thinks differently, and I think that Oda will ultimately conclude more so with what Tom said, but I need to see how more of the plot plays out. But nonetheless, it's such an interesting theme that I think encapsulates Frankie, the way the government is run, Robin in particular, and all of that sort of thing, and the idea of her being a demon because of this inherent threat that she has not acted on. So is the potential of a threat enough to sort of snuff something out? That's such an important and engaging theme to me, and it's one of the primary ones here. But in terms of the arc itself, like I said, it's great. I think that this arc is so go, 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 you know? There is something happening, something major happening in every chapter. It's so dense with world building or plot elements or character revelations or emotions or drama. It is so dense. This is the densest One Piece arc by far so far, even more than Alabasta, because there is so much happening. There is not a slow build-up whatsoever. There's world building, there's drama, there's emotions in every chapter, and it's honestly unbelievable. It's like this, Water 7 is a bona fide thriller. There's immense plot detail and world building focus and character focus, but the pace is so taut and tight, and there's so much happening. This is Oda's first take on a genuine thriller, I think. Unless I'm kind of forgetting, I don't know. But Water 7 as a setting, beautiful. I love how it's presented in the art. I think it's just like so many of the other settings throughout the series, it's just so interesting to think about and in execution and just to sort of take in. It's up there with Skypiea as one of the most creative settings. It's up there with like Little Garden. It's definitely one of my favorites, and it reminds me of Altitia for anyone who's played Final Fantasy 15. Altitia as a setting. That's the first thing I thought of. And also Delfino Plaza, a bit more simplistic, a bit more out there. Delfino Plaza from Super Mario Sunshine, but maybe you know where I'm coming from. Either way, the city is beautiful, and I love how it's presented. As for the cover stories here, we continue with Gadatsu, who eventually, through his adventures, finds something unusual in a cave, this huge mole. He makes it his slave, essentially. He continues to adventure throughout the world, and he discovers some things, and he goes to Alabasta in the end, and we see how Alabasta is doing. It turns out that the person who was sort of mentoring Gadatsu was Toto's brother. Yuba is some sort of oasis. It's beautiful to see how it's going there. We see Karu, we see Koza, we see Toto. They're all doing well. Love these characters, love to see them again. What a great decision for a cover story to go back to Alabasta. We see Vivi, my queen, thriving. It's lovely to see her again. I need her in another arc upcoming, but the crumbs we got here were great. And we see Pell is alive and well. And as you know, I'm not a huge fan of that plot element. You guys know what I have to think about it. I think it undercuts the moment of the sacrifice, but nonetheless, still nice to see him thriving and doing well. But to start finally going chronologically chapter to chapter, we start at chapter 322. Now, after Long Ring, Long Land, after all the stuff that happened with Aokiji, which was very stressful, very intense, the crew are kind of joking around. It's some nice slice of life stuff, some nice downtime. It's a great contrast to the Aokiji stuff, and I think it's very important for kind of resetting things. Luffy even jokes about the fact that he was frozen, which really shows his perseverance and ability to bounce back and put that sort of stuff at the back of his mind. Chopper is kind of healing Robin a bit more. She offers some kind words to him. He has this big smile. It's very cute. She again calls him Doctor, and they find a giant frog in the sea, and they begin following it. But then a giant sea train cuts them off and almost kills them, and almost wipes them out. It hits the frog, and we're introduced to the people on the train. Kokoro, Chimney, and Gonbei, this rabbit cat. Kokoro is an interesting character. She's this old woman. She kind of asks what they're doing, and Luffy says, "I'm gonna be king of the pirates," and she laughs not because she shoots down his dream, but because she finds him amusing and interesting, and she doesn't dissuade him, which is cool. And then we get some world building. It's explained that the sea train is called the Puffing Tom. Funnily enough, when I first read this on stream, I called it the Peeping Tom. I just misread it totally. But it circles the sea every day, transporting people across this area of the Grand Line, from island to island, which is very convenient, and it makes sense that this sort of thing would sprout up at this point of the world. This is very useful. They say that the frog was a bit of a nuisance that they had to deal with, and it often tries to fight the train, and its name is Yokozuna. But the crew eventually just tell Kokodo we're headed to Water 7, the city of water, and Kokodo says, oh, okay, that's a bustling town. That is a hub. It's a hub of the shipbuilding industry. It's a technological industrial power. The ships there are under commission by the world government. They kind of have their fingers in there, and it's a great destination for getting a carpenter, as Luffy and the crew kind of realize, and so they decide, yeah, let's for sure go there. But it's interesting that the government has their hands in there, because that is not a good indication, but it's a great indication for the intrigue of the plot. So, nonetheless, they decide, let's head out there. It just reaffirms their original stance. Seems like a great place to get a carpenter. So Kokodo gives them a map and kindly sets them off and gives them a letter of introduction so that they can get their bearings as soon as they get to Water 7, and Kokodo seems to have some sort of connection with the higher-ups in Water 7, which is nice because it allows the Straw Hats to get a bit of a leg up in their search. Kokodo then says, she sets them off and says, I might see you there because we're going to be going to Water 7 soon. So, a bit of a precursor to seeing them again. So the Straw Hats set off, and they start talking about who this new crewmate is going to be like, and what they want them to be like. Luffy draws who they should look like. It's a horrible drawing. It's very cute, it's very funny, lots of dorky interactions. And then Nami says, okay, so if we're going to do this, we need to find someone named Iceberg. That's who this letter is for, that's the leader here, so we have to find this person named Iceberg. Robin continues to look on to all these interactions from the outside, just smiling, taking it in, very Robin-esque. This is what she's been doing for forever. Since she joined the crew, she's been observing them from the outside looking in. That's her classic pose, and we'll see if it continues to be the case, just maybe with a different complexion, or if that's just how she's always going to be. And in what is now contextually a very sad scene for me, Usopp hugs the ship. He's hugging the ship and he's saying, we're gonna fix you up and this is all gonna be great. There's lots of memories and adventures in this wood, and we wouldn't let you, get all beat up. We're gonna fix you and we'll go on some more adventures. Oh my goodness. But in that moment, I did feel what he said. There is that idea of there being memories built into wood and locations, wood I say for the ship, and locations. If you've watched Rakugo, Shogen Roku Rakugo Shinju, that sort of idea is covered in that show as well. There is character baked into the personality of locations due to the memories that those locations have experienced. I think that's very true, and that's what Usopp's talking about here. Ultimately, they find the island. I already talked about how it's beautiful in its splendor, and they enter Water 7. Unbelievable visuals. It's like kind of half a city, half a port. There's land and there's water, and you can see the economy is built off of all sorts of things that revolve around the type of city it is, which is really cool. It feels very European to me. Some guy asks them what they're doing here with their pirate ship and what they want to do, and then directs them about where pirates have to weigh anchor. But before that, he kind of says, are you trying to pillage or something? As if it's like a very common thing, which I found interesting. I don't know. But they go to where they're directed to go, they unfurl the sail, and the mast kind of cracks, which definitely tells you where the ship's at. Then they need to go exchange currency, they have to do a bunch of little errands as well, so they head into town, and it feels almost like a vacation. We then cut to inside Water 7, where someone has gotten a job done for their ship being built, or some carpentry work done, and they refuse to pay. And that we then see that these are people called the Big Helmet Pirates, and they are swiftly dispatched of by the Galila Shipbuilding Company. So in Water 7, there is this company of shipwrights who then report to Iceberg, their leader, and they are the power here. Unlike other islands where maybe the pirates would be the power, in here, the shipbuilders are the power. They're looked to as the heroes, and they're essentially celebrated as the top of the top in Water 7, which is a really interesting detail. They kind of seem to carry out the quote-unquote law here, and I saw this spread, which is essentially a spread of the Galila Company, which is very raw. All the characters look really cool in it, but I was asked in chat, who can I point out do I think that would be the next carpenter for the crew? and I said, I don't really think anyone here is going to be the next Carpenter. I didn't get the vibes. I didn't really think that any of them would be the next one, just the way they were presented. I thought it would be someone else. Nami, Luffy, and Usopp go into town and they rent a bull named a Yagara. It's a species of sea bulls that allow them to travel throughout. It takes them through this maze of a city to this shopping district, and they notice that the people throughout town have these very beautiful yet kind of dark and creepy masks. They make their way through town, they make their way to the shipbuilding island, which is like the headquarters of sorts for the Galila company, which is where they're gonna go to ask about a carpenter. And they take an elevator up there that's powered by water, just cool little world building details which I really appreciated. This place really uses water for everything. We then see that Robin has gone with Chopper to do some shopping, Sanji has left too, so Zoro is left to guard the ship. While Zoro's guarding the ship, he gets attacked by someone with goggles. We then cut to Luffy and Nami and Usopp, who arrive at the shipbuilding island and see that the hubbub sort of that happened right after the Galila company did what they did, and they see that they are treated as rock stars. It's really interesting, it's a new approach, it's a new sort of culture, and Luffy's interested in this. Apparently the person who attacked Zoro is someone who's a member of the Frankie family. These people are bounty hunters. They said that they can silence even crying children. They don't seem to have any qualms about morals, and they love money and they need money for some reason, and they want to get rid of Zoro, or not get rid of him, but capture him because of his bounty. Zoro disposes of them easily, but it's a precursor to some plot events that would be important, and it adds this element of threat. Back with Chopper and Robin, there's some details. Chopper mentions that there's a costume party being held on San Faldo, another island on the sea train route. Robin said that. And then Chopper asks her how she knows these things, and she mentions here something very interesting, which is that since she's young, she's been observing people and been able to read people and make observations or deductions by listening to them and paying attention to their demeanor and their behaviors and their actions and their words. Now that may be part of why she's usually on the outside of the group, observing, like I always talk about. But it's a nice little detail for Robin's childhood. Chopper is adorable throughout this whole thing. He's very enthusiastically going to a bookstore. He says, "Can we go in here?" And Robin says, "Sure." But then in a really tense moment, Robin is approached by someone, a very imposing figure in a mask, who says, "I am with CP9. She looks very concerned, very frightened. She looks the way she did when Aokiji kind of talked about her past. She looks the way she does essentially when her past is brought up. This trauma that seems to be brought up. And she looks that way, and Chopper continues on in the bookstore, but after this situation, Robin disappears. The trio, Nami, Usopp, and Luffy, go to exchange their currency. They're about to get haggled, or they're about to get sort of ripped off, and then Nami does some haggling and gets them the proper price, Queen, and then they head towards Iceberg. They reach the shipbuilding company and meet a person named Kaku. And Kaku is a character with a very interesting design, quite a bit of a long nose that gets mistaken for Usopp, that's used as a running gag throughout the series, or throughout the arc, which I found really funny. And then he mentions to them that Iceberg is actually the mayor of Water 7. And Kaku says, "You know what, I'll run over to your ship to see what the repairs that need to be made are, while you wait to go see Iceberg." And he just essentially jumps off this huge jump. He said he'll take 10 minutes, and he runs off to the other side of Water 7 to check out their ship, to check out the Going Merry. And yeah, he's kind of just parkouring all over the damn place. Sanji is shopping in town, and then he spots Robin, who had just left Chopper, walking away with this mysterious person. She looks extremely downcast, and she looks like, you know, something is up here, and you know it likely has to do with her past. Sanji follows her, but then he kind of loses her. And then in the midst of this, he sees Kaku running above the buildings, and he goes, "Usopp?" The nose gag, which is funny, but it's also cool for the interconnectedness of Water 7, as we see the different characters and all these different perspectives on where they are and how they kind of interact, and it shows that interconnectedness and helps immerse you a little bit more. But Kaku makes his way onto the Going Merry to perform his inspections, and Zoro's there, and he initially goes, "Usopp." The way it was, I can't really do it justice, but the way that it's executed in the chapter is really funny. Like Sanji and then Zoro, quickfire, "Usopp?" It's just done really well. But then he eventually realizes he's a stranger and starts panicking a little bit. Iceberg introduces himself to the three who are meeting him, including his secretary, Khalifa. He's a fun character. He's listed all these obligations that he has to do, and he just says cancel them all. There's some quirk It's pretty funny. It didn't end up being a major part of his character down the line, but it establishes him as someone who isn't to be taken overly seriously, at least at the start, and it warms the audience to him a little bit. The crew kind of tell him off a little bit, saying that he's unprofessional, or it's weird that he's a mayor, and Khalifa kicks them, being clearly very defensive of him. And we know what's gone on with Khalifa and who she is and what's really going on here, so it's interesting that she's immersed herself so deeply into this role that she takes it this seriously. But I guess to fool people, you have to be that committed. And clearly, what's established here is that Mayor Iceberg is a man of repute. He is well loved, and the citizenry love him. His co-workers seem to love him. He has authority, but is nonetheless seen as someone who is to be respected and not really feared or coldly looked at, but someone who's warm, who has the best interests of this place in mind. And he says that he'll fix their ship due to Kokodo's blessing. He says that him and Kokodo are drinking buddies, which is a precursor to a couple of things later on. Kokodo and her drinking. Oh goodness. So while Kaku does the checks on the ship, Iceberg says, I'll give you a tour of this whole place, of the factory. And while they're getting this tour, Usopp has his 200 million berries that he's carrying from the currency exchange stolen from him by one of Frankie's people. Then a person named Polly kind of stops them, grabs the money, and then ultimately tries to run away with it in a very humorous scene, but he's brought back by someone named Lucci. Seems like the leader of the Carpenters, who seems to also be a ventriloquist. He talks through his pigeon, Hattori, who's this pigeon with a tie. I joked about this in chat, that he's automatically the best Hattori introduced in the series, after Hattori from Skypiea. But he kind of disciplines Polly, he kind of lambasts him a little bit in a humorous, yet kind of serious way, and it really helps you understand the dynamics between the Galila company. It feels very organic, it feels like they've known each other for a while, and they've embedded these kind of, not even just relationships, but roles between them, like a hierarchy. Nami asks who the people who tried to steal their money were, and then it's explained that they were the Frankie family, who are ship dismantlers and bounty hunters who sell bounties and ship parts for profit. They're very money-focused. And Luffy says they didn't seem too strong, and then Iceberg says do not underestimate Frankie. Polly has a little bit of a quirk with calling it blasphemous when women show even a little bit of their legs, if they're wearing dresses, or I don't know, he calls them a bunch of stuff. It's not, I like Polly as a character. I don't like this gag much. I don't think it adds much. I don't think it's very funny, but hey, it's worth mentioning, I guess. There are some more interactions between the Galila company, and then we're shown Main Street. The crew is shown Main Street, and it's beautiful. There is a spread that just adds such extensive detail to this place, and it really helps immerse you, like I said earlier. Like, there are people who look like ants, and there's work being done with lumber in one corner, and I literally just spent a few minutes on stream just looking in the different sections of this spread to see what people were doing, because there is thought put all over the place, and I just thought to myself, why not? If thought is put all across here, it's the least I could do to properly pay attention to this. And also because I was just genuinely interested. But yeah, Iceberg goes throughout the streets here, and he is well loved, like I said. Everyone adores Iceberg. And then we get some details. It is said that there were 7 shipbuilding companies, Khalifa says, and Iceberg merged them all into one, kind of monopolized a little bit. They don't really expand too much more on this, but it's an interesting detail that could indicate some stuff later on that would be filled in. Because despite this monopoly, everyone loves him. He has this charm. And Luffy straight up asked him, could you join our crew? He's impressed by him. And Khalifa and Polly and people surrounding him are like, how rude that he would just not even stand on ceremony and just do this and ask. But that's what I love about Luffy. He doesn't really think much about customs or culture, and just goes and says what he thinks is most honest, or what's on his mind at the time. He wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't really care about posturing. And sometimes it's insensitive and immature, other times it's kind of, there's a beauty in that innocence. And for better or for worse, I think sometimes it can be great, sometimes it can be not advisable, but I wouldn't change a thing about Luffy in that regard. That honesty is key to everything that he is. So Iceberg obviously can't do it, but he says, you can take anyone on my crew if you want some of them to join you, or one of them to join you. They just have to agree to it. Interesting. But then Kaku returns, and he says to the crew that the going merry cannot be fixed. And we cut to Zoro as everyone is shocked at hearing this, And Zoro just has this beautiful little lonely moment on the Going Merry, just reflecting and kind of talking to it and saying, "Will you really never sail again?" It's this very quiet moment, but I think it's amazing for Zoro's character and kind of the weight of what is going on here. This is gigantic news that changes the face of the entire journey. The Going Merry has deep emotional connection to everyone here. I talked about how the G8 arc kind of nailed that home, but this arc, that was very timely because this arc, right after it, nails that home as well. The Going Merry is so vitally important to everyone here, and it's heartbreaking to hear that. Sanji and Chopper eventually go back together again, and Sanji is panicking about seeing Robin with the masked person. And he's also thinking about what Aokiji says about Robin's past, and he's very much panicking. And they ultimately head back to the ship where Zoro is sitting quietly. Now back with Luffy and Nami and Kaku, Iceberg, whatever, Luffy questions immediately, why can't the ship be fixed? And it said to him, the keel is ruined. Excuse me, I gotta look to make sure I'm getting this right. The keel is ruined, the base, essentially the baseboard of the ship, the core backbone of the ship. It's explained as what makes a ship. And once it's damaged, it cannot be replaced, and the ship has to start from brand new, because you cannot build upon these flimsy foundations, or broken foundations rather. And Polly says immediately that it's just a scrap of wood, or a plank of wood, which is interesting that it's very impersonal for someone whose trade this is, but I guess that would make sense for someone who has seen this all the time to be a little cold and detached and impersonal about this. Nami and Luffy are very upset, and Luffy says, you know what, okay, I get it, but build it right up from scratch. And it just feels so desperate. There are so many emotions here as this symbol of their journey thus far, almost, the Going Merry, the emblem of the Straw Hats. They are feeling it slipping from beneath them. They don't want to say goodbye to it. It's like a crewmate in and of itself. And so Luffy says, build it from scratch, build it exactly how it was before. But it's stated to him, it won't ever be the same. This is something that cannot be replicated, because even if you have the exact blueprints of the Going Merry ship, wood warps. There are little characteristics of the wood in which the Going Merry was built and how the new ship could be built that'll make it creak differently, that'll make it maybe angle a little differently, that'll make the dimensions a bit different, that'll make maybe the sounds or smells or something different. It is impossible to replicate a ship with so many variables attached to the building of it and how it aged over time. And so it won't ever be the same, and it's gone. And Luffy thinks back to the origin of the Going Merry. It's so profound. The way this is drawn and the expressions and the tone, it immediately shifts into something very weighty, very sad, and you really, as the reader, feel it dawn on you how much this means to the crew, but how much it means to the story as well. The Going Merry, if it is to stop here, kind of signifies an era of One Piece. There's One Piece during the Going Merry. It joined in very quickly, right near the beginning of the series, and then there's One Piece after it. And just as the Going Merry cannot be replicated, neither can that specific era of the story and their adventure and their journey. And so it feels overwhelmingly sentimental and sad, because letting go of something like that, not even just something that you feel as a friend, but letting go of a period of your life and adventure, and it coming so suddenly, that's very difficult. I personally find it very difficult to let go of the past, of accepting that I'm in a new era of my life. And I think people tend to be like that. People are volatile in their sentimentality, and I think Luffy is as well, because you see him thinking back to the origin of the Going Merry and all the times they shared here, and to let go of it feels like turning your back on that, even if it's out of necessity, and it's desperately sad. And you see his eyes wavering. The way his eyes are drawn, they're drawn with rough kind of circles, and you just see that he's wavering here. And he keeps pushing back to Iceberg, saying, you know what, no, we will continue to ride the ship, we'll ride it out until the end. He says, it's our ship, that's ours, you cannot separate the Straw Hats from the Going Merry. She'll be fine, he keeps repeating it, that it'll be okay. But then Iceberg says something amazing, one of my favorite moments of the arc, where he says, you're willing to sail her till she sinks, and you call yourself the ship's captain. This is very much Water 7's Vivi moment for Iceberg. Just like Vivi said to Luffy all that time ago in Drum Island, you're really going to put Nami in danger through your impulsivity, and Luffy learned from that. Iceberg says here, you're really gonna just drive this into the ground. You're not going to have a cool head and understand This ship's race is run. Ships have a lifespan just like any other person. And when a ship's lifespan is over, you have to accept that, because you will be putting your crew at risk, your dream at risk, yourself at risk, through going past its expiration date just for the sake of not letting go of your emotions. Luffy is still impulsive, he must learn, and I've said so much before. I hope Luffy continues to learn throughout the series. I hope his maturity continues to be challenged, and this is exactly what I was talking about. I love this, I ate this up, because Luffy is a flawed person. He is. He is so forthright and honest and simple, and that really inspires people through his force of nature sort of, nature. But he's also very flawed in some ways. Sometimes he's overly emotional and doesn't let go of things, and too impulsive and bullheaded. It's irresponsible and dangerous to continue with the going merry, and Iceberg calls him out on it, and I love that. I love that the story continues to challenge Luffy, and how he is forced to confront the fact that he might be flawed, that his brand of leadership is not the be-all and end-all, and he's got to adjust. And Iceberg says here, think hard about it. We're willing to build you a new one with the money you have, but we cannot fix this up. It is done. And I think this is the true nature of Iceberg. Very responsible, mature, tough, but not cold. I think that's who Iceberg is at heart, and I think that it's exemplified really well here. And that was the best moment of Iceberg at that point, for sure. Luffy needs guidance at this point, and Iceberg's a great place to get it from. He's a straight shooter. He may be a bit tough, it may be a bit tough to hear, but he tells Luffy what he needs to hear. Then another member of the Galila Company, Lulu, says that there are world government leaders at Water 7, and we see that it's a man named Corgi. His character design's really interesting. He has a scar, he's a little bit older, but he generally looks very rough around the edges in a cool way, and he is snooping around and he says he smells pirates and he needs to talk to Iceberg. Now, what had happened before that I failed to mention, Usopp actually got kidnapped by Frankie's family. They took the money, they left empty suitcases, and Nami and Luffy find this out, and Nami goes to find Usopp. Polly tells her to go to this place northeast of the Cape or something called the Frankie House, and she takes it upon herself, and she goes, yep, I'll do it, and which really shows her growing leadership and growing confidence, and she goes there, and she finds Usopp completely beat up. And we've seen Usopp be beat up in a comical sense just in the last arc, in Long Ring Long Land, but this is different. This is horrific. And I love how Oda's able to differentiate between the tone of when someone's comically beat up and when it's desperately serious, because this is desperately serious. Usopp is so beat up, he is bloodied, he is mumbling and delirious, and through Nami's expression, we immediately know the tone here. She is devastated at this, she fears for him, and she feels such pain at seeing her friend like that. And it's horrible, but it's such good writing, and it's so powerful, and this is why I said negativity is important. We have gone along with the crew through 300 and whatever chapters, and the good times have been great, but that's why I said in Long Ring Long Land, we need some negativity, we need some strife, because that will really nail home how painful it could be to grow with these characters and see them get hurt, come to odds with one another, etc., to really nail home the emotional connection, to make the descent very powerful, and, negative emotions in storytelling are very important too, to then also make the ascents more powerful after you get to the bottom, because One Piece will always have an ascent. But Usopp is totally beat up here, and he is ashamed of his weakness. This is the insecurity that plagues him. Am I good enough? Am I strong enough? What utility do I have on this crew? It's so human. Such human things he is thinking about here. They're similar to the things that Nami thought about before, when she said she had to start fighting. But here, at the end of Long Ring Long Land, as he was overwhelmed, this is the through line to this. Back then he says, are we just gonna have to keep fighting people like this all the time? And he was just, you could see the weight of the world on his shoulders as he just thought to himself, how can we do this? And here, as he gets beat up, as the money gets taken from him, the money that's necessary to, in his eyes, fix the Going Merry, he feels such shame that he let down his crew, that he let down the Going Merry, and that he's just this burden. He wants to be brave and strong, that's been his goal, but he stumbles so much. He gets, he comes across these situations where he feels inadequate. And how relatable, how human is that? It's very painful. It's honestly very difficult to see Usopp like this. And he's ashamed, and he says, I can't face the others because I lost this money. They trusted in me, and I let them down. And Nami in response, she looks so determined. I love her bond with Usopp. She says, don't worry about the money. That's not what matters here. What matters is you. Very similar to what Usopp told Chopper when Chopper was confronted in Skypiea and said, you know, things can be rebuilt, ships can be rebuilt, but you, that what matters is you're okay. That kind of stings. Ships can be rebuilt, what he said back then. But nonetheless, that's what she says here, and I love that she says it to him. She says, don't worry, we'll get the money back, no doubt. So as Nami reflects on the painful stuff that just happened, she sort of thinks to herself, despite what she told Usopp, they do need the money. Like, she said don't worry about the money, but she did also say we have to get it. So they do need the money because the Going Merry is not going anywhere. It can't be fixed, and they need to get a new ship, and they need money for that. So it's kind of essential that they get it. Then Zoro, Sanji, and Chopper are reflecting on the Going Merry and how there's a bit of a contrast and foil between sailors and ships. As sailors get more hardy and pirates get more experienced over time, ships accumulate damage. And they don't last in the way that, or they don't progress in the way that pirates do, in that they can get more resilient. That's just not the nature of what a ship is, physically. And they're sad, but the sentiment here is very much the reality that the Going Merry is done. And they also worry about Robin. The spirits are down. They don't know what's going on with Robin, and they want to. But yeah, they are not in a great place. And they don't even know about Usopp yet. So back at Frankie's house, Frankie's crew and family give him the 200 million, and they say, basically, like, here you go, bro, this is what we needed. This'll help you get the thing you always wished for. And so that immediately made me think, what is he wishing for, obviously? Is there more to this guy? Like, what's going on here? What does he wish for? What are they doing this for? What is this kinship and relationship between them? I wonder what he needs. I wonder what's going on with him and his family, and it immediately made me want a backstory for Frankie. But it does key you into an idea. You know, he needs something with his money. He needs something far out there, something, dare I say, improbable. So the immediate vibes I got here were that Frankie could potentially be that crewmate. He is the one that I see the most thematic ties with the crew just through those first few lines there, and that's what I said when I first read this on on Twitch. I think, if I had to guess, someone's gonna join the crew. I think Frankie, but we'll see. But then I kind of stopped in my tracks a little bit and said, hold up, maybe I'm wrong, because Usopp comes back. He wants to fight back. He wants to correct his mistake and redeem himself in the eyes of the crew from his perception. This is a courageous, brave warrior, and he's come back, and he demands to get the money back. The family mocks him, calls him weak, they kind of like just spit at him, they just totally demean him. Frankie tells him not to defy him, and he beats him up further, and at this point I said, okay, maybe he's not a crewmate. Maybe not, maybe he's an antagonist, I'm not sure. Maybe he's not actually what I thought he was. But who knows? He does feel right here like an antagonist. But Oda is a variable, refreshing writer. Things are very dynamic, they can shift at a moment's notice, and I still thought at the end of this, he could potentially still become a crewmate. It's just in this moment, very antagonistic. But they keep beating Usopp up, and he keeps just yelling, give me back the money. And once again, this was desperately tough to read as a huge Usopp fan. Nami decides that she's gonna protect the ship, and the other three go out. They run into Luffy, who is looking for Usopp in a way similar to Kaku, and they eventually find him totally just destroyed, totally beat up, alive but unconscious, and Chopper says that he can save him, but he is just torn apart. And Usopp's been physically beaten before. In Alabasta, in other arcs, he's been beaten to a pulp, but he always stood up again. He always stood back up because he was protecting something, because his spirit had not broken, even though his physical body may have been broken. Just like Luffy, Zoro, what matters is that his spirit was not broken. And that is why he was able to get up, because he was protecting something, because he had the confidence in himself to protect those things. Or maybe not even the confidence in himself, but just the belief. But here he is broken. He's beat up and he cannot get back up again. And it's genuinely very emotional and difficult to see him like this. He's obviously beat up, he looks like he's at death's door, but what hurts most is not that, but his pride, and the fact that he thinks he's let his friends down, and he thinks that the money being lost will be horrible for them, and that is what hurts the most, and it is desperately sad to see someone, a character you care about. I care a lot for him. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, to see him in that state, because it's never fun to see a character you really like, that you want to succeed, to beat himself up like that, to think of himself as worthless. It's never fun. And I think Oda did a wonderful job in getting across not just how he feels, but the severity and seriousness of the moment. It's all falling apart. The going merry cannot be fixed. Robin has gone. Usopp is beat up and feels inadequate and feels like he's not worthy of being on the crew. And in a moment that reminded me a lot of the walk to Arlong Park for Nami, from Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro, and Luffy, the four of them here go to defend their friend. They go to protect their brother. They walk to Frankie's house. For their nakama, for their friend's honor, they go to take all this back. And there's a quick panel of each of them, very Oda-esque panel, and they all look determined, they all look resolute, resilient, and there is just deathly seriousness, severity in each of their eyes. And it's nice to have Chopper be a part of this, because he hasn't really been. We've definitely seen Luffy like this, we've seen Sanji like this, we've seen Zoro like this. We have not seen Chopper like this, and I love that he was a part of this. But they walk into Frankie's house, and Frankie's gone. But they're all celebrating, and Nami, we cut quickly to Nami as she is thinking to them, please just blast them to bits. And Usopp, lying on the ground, is just thinking about the damage he did in losing the money. But it just reminds me of what he told to Chopper. All that matters is that you are okay. And that very directly lends itself to why the crew are doing what they're doing. They are not confronting the Frankie family because they lost their ship, or they lost the money for their ship. They're doing it for their friend. They're doing it because their friend is not okay, and they won't lie down. They won't let that happen. And so they walk in there, immediately Luffy lands a punch on one of the Frankie guys, and there is such an amazing panel, all four of them confronting them, facing them. And they taunt Luffy, and he's silent, very much like Jaya almost, and then he just destroys someone with apparently impermeable armor, and he again just looks deathly serious. This is the most serious I think I've seen any of these characters. And from chapters 1 to chapter 330, these moments still hit because they keep coming and they keep coalescing in so many different ways as the characters progress, and they always hit. Zoro has his moment, he's cutting the cannonballs and stuff, Sanji is kicking, Chopper's doing his thing too, and Frankie's people are panicking as every one of these characters get their moment to avenge their comrade, their friend. And they offer the money back, but the crew straight up say, this is far more than that. This isn't about that anymore. This cannot be fixed with the money. It doesn't matter what Usopp lost. What matters is what they did to him. And then they say something that took me aback in how violent it was, but I totally get it, and I totally love it for the story. They say, get ready to have every bone in your bodies broken. This is different. They have never been this angry. They have never felt the need to say something like this, because nothing like this has happened before. It is unreal, and there are silent panels of all of them, and they just destroy them. And they decide, do we pursue Frankie? They don't really know, but either way, they have to get Usopp to the ship, and they have to get him healed. And they have to regroup, and they wonder about Robin too. They're in an interesting position, to say the least. But before they go, just within a couple of chapters, Luffy has made a decision, very key decision, very quick maturation, and he says, we have to say goodbye to the going merry. He takes Iceberg's words to heart, and he needs to be a captain that can be responsible, who will be a leader that won't lead his shipmates, to harm. He needs to be someone who's flexible, who takes in opposing or alternate points of view to ingratiate into his philosophy. And so he learns from Iceberg here, just like how he learned from Vivi. And that's something I love about Luffy. He is flexible. He is able to understand when he's wrong and ingrain it into himself. And he does here. As he says, something that's very difficult, something that he does with a heavy heart, we have to let go of the going merry. Maybe he did this through seeing Usopp and thinking, could I potentially lead the crew to similar states by running them into the ground on this ship that is a hazard? I don't know, but either way he comes to this conclusion, and is mature and is responsible. Now I'll say it straight up, chapters 331 to 333 are the peak of One Piece for me. Up until this point, Luffy and Usopp were my favorite two characters. That was what they were in the past video. And this is a series of chapters that not only focus on the two of them, but it brings up all the things that have been building up for Usopp and for his character in such an emotional, devastating, heartbreaking way, while also substantiating Luffy and showing the difficulties of Luffy and his position. It's just phenomenal storytelling. It is the best One Piece storytelling up until this point. You know, maybe aside from the Skypiea conclusion. Those would be the two, I think, which would be the two biggest peaks of One Piece. The Skypiea conclusion and this stuff. And this is by far the most negative, negative emotions I felt in a good way towards this series. And this is just exactly why I said we need some negativity for the story, for the strength of the story. We need to be heartbroken, and good God was I heartbroken. So Corgi leaves the Galila headquarters kind of disgruntled because he wasn't able to get it from Iceberg. Iceberg looks out, tentative. He tells Khalifa that Corgi's very persistent, and he's been asking around for something that Iceberg has that he's not been able to give to him, or he's not wanted to give to him. He always sends him away. And then the panels kind of shift in an interesting way to show Robin's bounty as a kid. 8-year-old Nico Robin and her 79, 78, whatever it was, million berry bounty. Usopp then wakes up and he blames himself, and the crew tell him they're gonna go to Frankie to get the money. They discuss the going merry a little bit, and then Usopp is told by Luffy that they'll be changing ships. He explains, the ship is just done. It's on its last legs. That's just how it is. It sucks, it's heartbreaking, but we have to move on. And Usopp is obviously shocked about that. He is devastated about that, and Luffy is saying these things, and he's saying that, but at the same time, you know how much it pains him to have to break this to him. But that's the burden of the captain. That's the responsibility you have, and he has to sometimes do the things that are logical and undercut his emotions for the sake of the grand picture, of the big picture. But Usopp is in denial. He doesn't believe it. He doesn't trust the word of the shipwrights who gave them this information, and he says, let's trust in the journey we've had thus far. Let's trust in the going merry. It's never led us down the wrong path. They've had this journey. He's always fixed it up. It's always been okay. Let's just continue. And he tells Luffy that he's abandoning it and that he'll fix it like always, but Luffy says, no, you're not a carpenter. It's broken. He just essentially repeats what are the true facts at this point. Usopp won't accept help from anyone else, and the argument just gets more and more and more heated, and Usopp says he will never abandon the going merry. And he says he's disappointed in Luffy for not being able to see through the lies of these people and to hold strong to his faith in the ship. And it's heartbreaking because Usopp says here he's disappointed in Luffy because he's always idolized Luffy, but he's so hurt here. He has such pain here. He feels so betrayed here. Not even necessarily personally by Luffy, but he's got a lot of guilt, and he's projecting, and he projects some of his self-worth onto the going merry, and he sees himself in it, and he sees it broken and battered, and perhaps at a point in the journey where he views it as not as useful anymore, reflective of himself, and he sees it being abandoned, and he doesn't want it to be abandoned because he doesn't want to be abandoned. There are so many layers of psychology here, so many human layers that he's projecting onto this. But in the end, he is wrong. Luffy is right to do what he's doing. Luffy is in the right, for obvious reasons, but Usopp was right in one thing. He told Luffy normally you'd just keep going until the ship sinks, and that is true. Normally he would. That's what he said to Iceberg that he would do, but that he just cannot do that here. He can't do it for the sake of his crew, for the sake of the safety of his journey and the longevity. As a captain, he has to learn and be flexible, all the stuff I said before. And it's crazy the burden of the captain here. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but you really see it here because Luffy, he has on two sides, two totally opposing views, totally criticizing him. On one, he has Iceberg, to whom he says, I'm going to keep going until the ship sinks. I'm going to run it into the ground. And Iceberg says, you're an excuse for a captain. You're a sorry excuse for a captain. You're irresponsible. On the other hand, he has his beloved friend Usopp, his brother, who he tells, no, we have to switch ships. Who then tells him, I'm so disappointed in you, for irrational but deeply emotional reasons. And it's so tough. You don't envy him being in the middle of that, but he does make the right decision and he does stick by it. And you have to respect that for Luffy. And the fight intensifies. Nami tries to break it up, but Luffy says, my mind is made up. And it takes a great deal of strength for him to say that, and kudos to him for saying that, because that is not an easy situation to be in. But throughout this whole thing, I also got the impression that Luffy very much wanted Usopp to say his piece. He wanted to let Usopp say his piece, even if it was hurting him. He very much respected him taking this stand, I think, even if he was wrong, or incorrect rather. Maybe I'm looking too much into it. I just got the vibes that Luffy was letting him say some of these things. I think he wanted Usopp to be able to say his piece, and I think he respected that he wanted to say this piece. Usopp just restates essentially that he's let down, and there's all the stuff that I talked about before of Usopp projecting onto the going merry, but it also represents this inner strength. It always persevered. Even when it was beat up, it went up into the sky, it came back down. It has been all over the place, and it's taken them wherever they need to be. And so I think in the Going Merry, he sees this inner strength, the way that he wants to be, this strength to persevere. And he sees it just being tossed aside like this. And then he says something very hurtful. He says to Luffy that he never really cared. And Luffy begins fighting him, begins kind of roughing him up a little bit, and he says, "Why don't you just..." And then he gets cut off. He was about to say, "You might as well just leave." But Sanji cuts him off by kicking him in the face and saying, "You better watch what you say. You are about to say something horrible." And I love amazing Sanji moment there. Telling Luffy, showing him up and telling him, "Check yourself. You've gone too far here." A captain, a leader needs people like that to keep him centered. And it was pointed out to me in chat actually, Sanji is well aware of how you could say something you don't really mean because you're angry, because he did it to Zeff himself. And he tells Luffy, "Don't you dare say that." And Luffy goes, "Oh yeah," and he kind of checks himself and just goes, "Okay, yeah, you're right. I didn't mean that." But Usopp says, "No, you're right. I am weak. I'm a burden. And it makes sense that you would abandon weak things, the ship and me." He says that his ambitions never really lined up with Luffy's goals. They were always different. And we've said that in these videos from the start. His goal has been different from the Straw Hats. It's been more internal than the external goal of a lot of the other ones. Finding the One Piece, becoming the king. He wants to be brave, and he sees a difference there between them. But no, for all the reasons we've talked about before, he's wrong here. It's the same sentiment, it's the same dream, it's the same means to carry out that dream. And even though it's different in a lot of ways, the sentiment, the core of it, is very much in keeping with the spirit of the Going Merry, of keeping with the spirit of Luffy and the crew and the Straw Hats. And then he says that he's going to leave the crew. And this is the drama. This is the drama I was waiting for. Little did I know it would happen with Usopp, the character I love so much. I don't like seeing these things, but at the same time, I do, because it's wonderful storytelling, and it's so beautifully painful. And Usopp says, "Yeah, I'm leaving. I can't keep up with you, and I'm sorry for being a burden." And then he says, "Fight me," to Luffy. He says, "If I win, I'm taking the Going Merry." He's gonna do with it what he wants to do. And Luffy's obviously going to destroy him, is the first thing I thought. But is that not bravery? Is it not bravery to fight to protect your ideals? As irrational as they are for Usopp here in this situation, he is in the wrong. But is that not bravery? To fight for what you want to defend and protect, and for your dreams and for your ideals? Is that not what Luffy taught him? Now, of course, he's wrong here. He's incorrect. He's being irrational, and he's fighting for something that I think down the line he'll realize, I was wrong there. But nonetheless, he is taking a stand here against someone who is so clearly stronger than him. And I think Luffy respects it, because he accepts it, and he says, "That's it, that's done, we'll do it." And throughout the whole thing, Zoro is giving some very silent, knowing glances of Usopp. He has observed Usopp throughout this entire journey so far. He's observed him in Drum Island, and remember when he carried Dalton, all that stuff. He's been observing silently, and he's been appraising. And here, he does the same, and it's like, penny for Zoro's thoughts here. So they set a time for the fight at 10 tonight, or 10 that night. Nami tries to talk Luffy out of it. Luffy just says, "Too late, it's agreed, it's done, we're doing it." And like I said, I think he respects it. I think part of the reason he's doing this is because he respects what what Usopp is doing. He's hurt by what he says, but in the end, this is a battle between warriors, and nothing should come in between that. I think he respects his courage, I think he respects his conviction, even if it might be misplaced. And Sanji and Zoro are arguing. That's nothing new, but there's a new complexion to it, a heavier, darker one, sadder one. Chopper returns, just crying, bawling his eyes out, saying that he wanted to treat Usopp, but Usopp wouldn't let him treat him. He said that they're not crewmates anymore. And Nami says, "All the great times we had in the past, it feels like a lie now." And obviously they weren't a lie, but you understand exactly why she feels that way. And it's desperately sad. It's so human to understand why she would think that. And she says that the crew is falling apart. And it really is. The Going Merry, the symbol of the crew, is falling apart, and so is the crew. And, man, Usopp felt like Luffy was abandoning the Going Merry because it couldn't keep up with the journey anymore, in the same way that he himself feels inadequate, like he can't keep up with the journey anymore. He doesn't see his own worth. He doesn't see what others see in him, which is such a human thing, by the way. I think Zoro understands what's going on here. I think he's in denial. he's in denial about reality, about the state of the Going Merry, and that they have to say goodbye to it. He hates how inadequate all this makes him feel, and I think he also feels like he doesn't want to let the crew down as well, in the way he did just here. I think there's an element of that to it. There are so many different elements. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but there's so many things to talk about here. Feel free to share your own if you'd like, in AGP's comments or just on their own. There is so much here. Usopp has lacked a role in the crew. He's always repaired the Going Merry. He's always seen it as this extension of himself in a way, because it joined on Syrup Village with him. Kaya, I believe, gave him the ship, I think. So it's been his contribution to the crew as well, and so he attributes some personal self-worth to it in a way unique from everyone else. And so not only does he feel like he himself is not good enough, but the Going Merry, which is an extension of himself in a way, and what he provided to the crew, is now being dismissed too. So it's just so much. It's just a whirlwind, a hurricane of so many elements that just make him feel like he is not of any use anymore. There's so much sentimental value here. He can't let go. I am weak. He sees himself reflected in it. But the fight starts, and there's a great standoff spread. It is heartbreaking. And funnily enough, Usopp kind of gets the upper hand. He's being very resourceful. He says, I've seen you fight, Luffy. I know what you can do, and I know how to counter it. And he beats Luffy down, and Luffy's a little beat up, and he's laying down, and you think, obviously, he has gone through way worse than this in the story, but his will has never been beaten like this. His spirit has not been crushed like this in the way that Usopp is doing it. And it's heartbreaking in that way. So can he get up? Does he want to get up, is what I thought. And he thinks to all the great times he had with Usopp. And I was tearing up big time during this stuff. I'm tearing up again now. Can you believe it? The third time in this video, I'm tearing up just talking about Luffy and Usopp. And there's these flashbacks to all their times together, and it also cuts to the Going Merry, and it's raining, and a raindrop goes down from the eye of the Going Merry, making it look like it's crying. Amazing little touch there. And you really feel for Chopper as well, because Luffy and Usopp are essentially his two heroes. Maybe the two most prominent ones, I think, at least. And he's torn between them. He doesn't want to see them fighting each other. He looks up to both of them. So you feel a lot for Chopper as well. But Luffy ultimately does get up. I was wondering in the chapter if he would. He does. But it pains him to do this. There are more flashbacks. The crew... Some of the crew can't watch, but Zoro continues to just look on, almost feeling like it's his duty. And then the crew kind of all watch him. They watch both of them out of respect for these two warriors. For anyone who's watched Berserk, there is a certain duel in Berserk that this reminded me a lot of. If you've watched or read Berserk, Golden Age, near the end of Golden Age, as a certain band watches two people fight, I think you guys know what I mean if you've read Berserk. This reminded me a lot of that. But the dust settles, and Luffy wins. Zoro says the fight is over, and Usopp's beaten, and Luffy instead says to him, you take the Going Merry. He says, I'm gonna take a new ship and we're gonna continue forward. And there are flashbacks to Elbaf, adventures between Usopp and Luffy, and Luffy says, so long. And Chopper, obviously loving Usopp, goes to try to heal him, but Sanji says, don't do that. Usopp knew, going into this fight, that he would be beat up, he would be defeated, and he did it anyway because he had the courage to. Don't pity him, don't spit on his pride by helping him. And that's Sanji applying some of the things he learned during Baratie, or we see exemplified during Baratie, and telling Chopper that. Another lesson for Chopper. And then Luffy, his face under his hat, says, it's heavy. And Zoro replies, the duty, the burden of being captain. That's the burden of being captain. Damn straight. And he says, but if you doubt yourself, who can we have faith in? Luffy needs to fight to defend his decisions like he did here, as painful as it can be, even against crewmates. And he leaves Usopp in the ship, and both of them crying. Usopp crying, the Going Merry we saw crying before, and Luffy himself as well. And this really contextualizes why Long Ring Long Land, the tone of it, was so distinctly different. We needed a very comical, simple arc in between the immense emotion of Skypia's climax and then this. This is just unbelievable. And Usopp here, finally the captain of his own ship. Skypia was this complete validation of dreams and everything, and then very similar to kind of like Greed Island in Hunter x Hunter, it gives the characters this high and then just comes crashing down. And Long Ring Long Land is a great little bit of respite to not make it too whiplashy, and to give us a few chapters or a small arc of respite before to sort of recalibrate before all of this would happen. It's great structure and design. The fight is amazing. It's drawn amazingly. The emotions, all the thematics, the expressions, and how it ends. It is phenomenal, and it is my peak of One Piece so far. That and Skypia's ending. And I was asked, at the end of the day, wrong or right, correct or incorrect. And I've been saying so far, Luffy's right in that the ship needs to be changed. It needs to be changed over. I said in my chat also as well, I would personally, if possible, take the head of the Going Merry and somehow keep it for the new Going Merry, or the new ship, and just so the spirit can continue on, if that's possible. I would do that, but either way, that's a digression. Luffy's right. Luffy is correct in saying we need to switch ships, but it was asked to me in chat, who's more right? Whose side are you on? And while I get the sentiment of things like that, I just can't find it within myself to look at fiction that way. In this, I see two men who are just desperately hurt. One is making an irrational decision, the other one understands his conviction and disagrees with him, but nonetheless respects him, I think. And we have these two people who are so hurt in such unfortunate circumstances, it doesn't really matter to me much to pick a side. I don't want to pick a side. I don't care that Luffy's more right than Usopp, or more correct. I'm not on Luffy's side. I really enjoy both these characters, and I see where both of them are coming from, and I see their pain, and I see why Usopp's acting the way he is. It's so human. And so I don't want to pick a side here. I just want to empathize with both and feel for both. But the dust settles once more, and Usopp is just laying with the ship. Luffy is immediately downcast, as you'd expect in the aftermath of that. He just isn't able to bounce back from this immediately like he was to the defeats in fights against Sir Crocodile, against Enel, for example. This is different. This is much more emotional. This is much more spiritual. And what's crazy about that is he won the fight, and he feels the most beat down here. But the crew then learns some really important plot details. Iceberg has been shot. The Gallilost shipbuilders in town, everyone's in mayhem, trying to figure out what's going on and trying to ensure that Iceberg will be okay. People want to avenge him, some want to protect him, and then Frankie arrives back in town after going off to do who knows what. Now, according to the doctor, the room that Iceberg was in when he was shot, it was a closed room, and he was shot 5 times, and a single mask was left behind. The town's in an uproar, and Frankie sees his old home totally destroyed thanks to the Straw Hats, and he declares that he'll get them. He'll get back at them, and he is deeply upset. Now we cut to the sea train with Kokodo, who then says the Aqua Laguna is on its way. This is a period of high tide where the town will be underwater. A great portion of the town will be underwater. Some of it is permanently underwater, a great deal of the old part of the town. But nonetheless, once a year, this Aqua Laguna comes in, rolls in, and there are customs that they must follow for safety, and it's this huge high tide period. And I like the world building details here, because not only does it affect the plot in an integrating way, which I appreciate, but there are huge character emotions going on here at this point in the plot, but at the same time, the world continues to be built in the background, which I really appreciate, because Water 7 is an extensive location. It is as fleshed out as something like Skypia or Alabasta. I'd say it's right up there with both of them. But the emotions are so heavy such that it's in the background the whole time, so it's easy to forget it a bit more in service of some of the other elements of the story. But it is being substantiated very well. It's funny, there were some shots of some lumber workers throughout town. I said that a couple of them looked very sus. They were just random guys. Chat kind of got a kick out of that. And Luffy and Nami go into town and they want to see Iceberg. And Frankie appears in town. He begins singing with sisters Kiwi and Mozu, who look like they had boxes on their heads due to their silhouettes, but they just have a square afro. The town seems to hate their singing and dancing, but Frankie is an interesting character, interesting person. He starts dancing here, and he ultimately sees Luffy and declares that he wants to fight him for what he did to him, for what he did to his home. We then get a quick cut to Khalifa, who tearfully says that Iceberg has woken up. He is okay, he has regained consciousness, and she says that Nico Robin is the one who attacked him. And again we see her poster. Again we see that Iceberg has this fixation on Robin for some reason. There are posters of her throughout, or at least one poster, in his room. He has some sort of special connection with her. Now, Frankie yells at Luffy, dancing while doing so. There's some nice humor here. It's pretty funny. It's a nice bit of respite right after the Luffy Usopp stuff, which I think is welcome, but there's also serious plot stuff happening in the background as well. Frankie says he needs to beat him to get revenge or to right the scales or whatever, but he also says that he spent all the money that he stole, clearly on whatever it was that he needed. And Luffy says he doesn't really care about the money once again, he just wants to kick his butt. Potentially because of Usopp, once again. And Frankie then breathes some fire, but he doesn't have a devil fruit. And he says something that made me double take. He says that he's a cyborg. And him and Luffy's fight ensues. Now, because of what's gone on with how Robin is the one that supposedly attacked Iceberg, blame for this shifts to the Straw Hats, and it goes throughout town. There is propaganda being spread everywhere. It really shows another thing that I don't think I mentioned in the beginning, but I think is pretty prevalent, how quickly the populace's opinions can shift. And you understand why their opinions on the crew shift in this way, because it's an authority that's telling them these things, and they love Iceberg. It really shows how much they love Iceberg, and you'd imagine that they would feel this way. So it makes sense, and you understand why they do it, but it's nonetheless an interesting idea. And there are things later in the arc as well that show how things can shift very fast. So essentially, the Straw Hats are fugitives. Iceberg is very confused about what happened. He doesn't know why Robin would do this or why they would want this, but he says what he saw. He wonders if they're with the government. The Straw Hats with the government. That's a good one. Who knows, though? Could that happen eventually? I could see it happening. But Khalifa says she'll stay by his side. Very sweet. If we didn't know what happened with that. And the Gali Law crew show up and interrupt Luffy's fight with Frankie, because they essentially want to punish him for being the leader of the Straw Hats who were responsible for what happened to Iceberg. Tons of misunderstandings all over the place. Frankie's pretty annoyed that the Gali Law company would interrupt his fight. They said they also want to deal with him for some reason, for messing up their factory, for messing around with things in general. Luffy says he's innocent, and he's very confused about what's going on. It's clear that Robin's acting on her own, and Luffy didn't give her these orders, but this is something that's gone over the heads of a lot of people involved, and so obviously they're pursuing him. They start fighting Luffy. Nami is very confused. It's a great fight. It's drawn really well. It flows really well. There's chaos, but it's not too hectic to understand what's going on. The presentation's very good. And then Paulie finally tells Luffy what he's accusing him of, and Luffy straight out denies it. And they say that Iceberg saw Robin, to which Luffy is shocked, Nami's shocked, and Luffy's upset. He says, stop telling lies about Robin. He can't believe what he's being told. And he kind of basically alludes to what he said about Nami in Arlong Park. I don't care what she was before. I know Robin now, and I trust who she is, and she wouldn't do this. Stop telling lies. That's always been his principle, and that's always been something I love about Luffy, and it stays consistent here, as he defends Robin in the same way he did towards Nami. And the Gali Law Company say that Luffy needs to die for what happened here, and the word spreads throughout the town, and we see that Robin is reading a newspaper and kind of on top of a balcony high up, looking at all the chaos from above. And she hears this, and the Straw Hats are getting blamed for her actions. Now, Sanji and Chopper hear about the Aqua Laguna and that the high tide is coming in, and they see Usopp, and they kind of go at a distance away from him, but they scream, "Run away!" so he can hear it, so he's alerted to the presence of the danger. Very cute. And Sanji kind of mimics Usopp running away in the way he's drawn, which is, again, adorable. The Gali Law continue to go after Luffy, and eventually Frankie just kind of sits back and takes in the show. He mentions that the Gali Law, they're doing a great job, and they're the pride of Water 7. But then he goes, hold up. I gotta fight Luffy. I was the one fighting him. I was mad at him. Frankie's very quirky. He's very interesting and all over the place. He then wreaks havoc with his coup devant. He's impressed with Luffy's courage. He respects Luffy's courage. And here, once again, I got vibes. Crewmate vibes? He's respecting Luffy? I don't know. But Luffy and Nami escape, and the Gali Law post people all around town. They defend Iceberg, and they also look for the Straw Hats and Luffy, and we hear that Aqua Laguna is coming in at 12:30 that night, just past midnight. And so no one can escape this island, no one can escape by boat. And what's interesting is we got this exposition about the Aqua Laguna and all that it was in situations separate from Nami, but she realizes what's going on just through observing the weather patterns. She is so resourceful, she is so observant and knowledgeable, and she's able to just understand what's about to happen just through looking at the weather. But then they're on the rooftops, and she points out what must be Iceberg's office. Luffy breaks in right away, and there are people after him, but Khalifa lets him in, because prior to this, Iceberg had asked her for a favor, and this might have been the favor. And she sends the people who are pursuing Luffy away so that he's alone in his room with Iceberg. And Iceberg says he doubts that Luffy intends to kill him, and Luffy just wants to be filled in. He wants to understand what's going on. And Iceberg asked him for a favor, and he says, I want to see Robin one time. And the idea here is, why? What is their history? What is going on? And here he says he gambled on a little bit of hope here so that he could get closer to the truth. Luffy then leaves and he tells Nami that it was Robin, and he still doesn't want to believe it. And this is something else that I really like. Luffy's ideals and faith in his friends being tested. You know, he was tested earlier in the arc about his maturity as a captain with regards to the Going Merry. Here he's being tested about his trust with his friends, something that's always been unwavering, but it's being tested to the very limits here, and he continues to be tested. He's being put through the ringer, and I love it. It's all so great for Luffy. After this arc, I cannot imagine that he won't be changed in a bunch of ways. Water 7 is following through on a lot of my hopes. I got Luffy being tested as a crew, as a captain, the Usopp stuff, more Robin-centric stuff, which I wanted in terms of plot focus, and just generally the negativity associated with the crew here that then helps us feel their bonds being strengthened for when they ultimately come back together. I hope they come back together. I think they will. Frankie then goes into a bar, and he's called the real leader of Water 7 there, which is interesting. The unofficial leader, maybe? And he goes into this place called Blue Nose Bar. Blue No owns this bar, and he sees Kokodo there drinking, and she's there because of the Aqua Laguna. He asks her if her house is waterproofed, and she says she doesn't have one. Interesting. And she also brings up that she doesn't think the shooting of Iceberg was the work of pirates. It doesn't feel right to her. And Frankie very much wants her info. He's very invested in her info here, which is another interesting little detail. But then it's brought up that the world government want things from Iceberg, and that it could be something to do with them. There could be some shady shit going on as the world government tries to understand or tries to get some secret, quote-unquote, as Corgi was looking for from Iceberg. But Kokodo is sure to say that she doesn't think that it's Corgi that's doing these things, because the guy is not an assassin. He is not sneaky. So there might be some underlying elements here with some very sneaky people who want to get something from Iceberg. Could potentially be CP9, who seem to be doing these shadowy jobs, and that Robin seems to be a part of it to some degree. And it's stated here that CP9 is great at what they do, which is erasing people without a trace. And then we cut to Robin talking with some mystery man. He's shrouded in shadow. There's also a butler there, and this guy says that Robin is wanted. Robin is wanted by someone for some reason. And he also says, sneak into the mansion tonight, steal it, and do all this for the sake of justice. Very sketchy deal here. Why is Robin carrying out this deal with this guy? Why does he want her to do these things? What is her end goal? And like, who is this guy also? Who the hell is it? I don't know. Luffy and Nami are evading capture. We see the town evacuating into shelters. We see the routine for these evacuations, and we get sort of spliced, interspersed bits throughout the town as we see the weather, ramping up, and the rain falling down, and the tension. It's all done really well. It's really nice integrative atmosphere and tension building. And we see that the masks are forbidden when entering the city due to high alert for the Straw Hats. And Zoro is casually just sitting in the corner in one of the alleys in the city, just going, oh, that's why they're after me, as he reads his wanted poster. And then people kind of look at the Going Merry saying, oh, this is their boat, kind of desecrating it as Usopp looks on, seemingly ready to defend it. A lot of really interesting, some heavy emotional stuff as well, just going on around the town. And it really drives a nail in because they say, ooh, it looks abandoned. Good God. Sanji and Chopper look for Robin, and Chopper thinks to himself, did I make a mistake at the bookstore? Did I say something wrong? And it's very sad for him, and what I love is that Sanji is there to reassure him. Sanji has some great stuff. He's not one of the primary characters of this arc, but he's definitely part of a lot of really important developments, and he says a lot of really, really important things. I think back to when he kicked Luffy and cut him off. I think back to when he told Chopper, don't heal Usopp. And then I think of this as well. He's had some really good moments throughout the arc, and I'm really happy with his role so far. They then find Robin across a canal, and they kind of reach out for her, yell out for her, and she says she won't be going back to the crew no matter what they ask her. She says there's a darkness in her. She says that there's no lies being told about her. She did what she did, and that there's this darkness inside of her that will swallow up everything, will swallow up them. For their own good, they should avoid her. Similar to what Aokiji said, basically exactly what Aokiji said. But that makes me think, her face during what he said was so fearful, was so traumatized. She doesn't believe that. She is believing that because she's been forced to believe that. Because, I don't know, I'm just guessing. But I don't think that she truly wants that to be the case. I think she's 100% going against her will here and just doing this either for the crew or because she just doesn't see any other option out of it. But she isn't speaking her heart here. And by the end, Sanji asks her some more questions and she refuses to answer. And then she just says, "This is the last time we'll ever see each other again, and thank you for the kindness you've shown me." Which is a big hint that she's cared for them all along. She's very much valued their connection, and she's done all these things not because she doesn't like them, but maybe because she has to, or maybe there's guilt for some reason, or a lack of self-worth, similar to Usopp. I don't know, but there's so much at play here, and they chase after her. Ultimately, it comes to nothing. And Sanji just tells Chopper, "Tell the others what happened. I gotta do some stuff on my own." And he goes off to do something. Chopper goes and tells Luffy and them about it, and Luffy is shocked. Is it because his perception of who Robin is cracking? Is he being tested a ton? Is he thinking to himself, am I wrong to think the way I do about her? Does he just not believe it? Either way, he's being tested once again here, and Zoro, who is a great devil's advocate in this situation, gets down to brass tacks. He goes, "We need to understand what her deal is, we need to know her, we need to know whether she's our enemy or not, and then proceed from there." And as the person who never trusted her in the first place, he's a great person to do this, not because he doesn't have bias, but also just because he has the wherewithal, and he's forthright enough and fair enough to understand that there is a possibility that they could be able to trust her, which he doesn't. But he brings it up here. So, I don't know, Zoro has a great subtle role in this arc as well, but it comes down to it, can we trust her, friend or enemy? And then they think they could be framed for killing the mayor if Robin actually wants to do that for some reason, and they're near the scene. Nami doesn't want to think about that, but worst case scenario, that is something that could come to pass. And Zoro says, we have to think of the worst case scenario here, it's just smart. And Nami mentions the people in the masks and wonders if she's comrades with them, if Robin's comrades with them. And Zoro says worst case scenario she is. Best case scenario she's being taken against her will, and that is good because it means that her loyalty is still with them. She's a friend. But Luffy just says it, our objective is to catch Robin, and they squat up and they go. Now we cut to Usopp and he is buying lumber. He meets the most precious salesman in the entire world, as he doesn't have enough money to get the materials to build or to fix the Going Merry. But he gives the materials to him anyway. He's concerned about his injuries. He gives him some food. Bless this guy's soul. But Usopp, yeah, he gets all this stuff and he starts essentially fixing up the Merry. And it's so sad because we know it's futile. The boat is broken. And he is just doing this. He is in denial, doing this because he has to. Because his fragile self-worth and his feelings of who he is and identity are so tied to it that he needs it to be okay, even though I think deep down he knows it isn't. But he perseveres and just says, it'll all be fine, you've been in the sky. Why can't you survive here? It's heartbreaking. Then Frankie storms out of a bar in a rampage, and people are going, what's the deal with this guy? And Kokodo says, you can't possibly understand what idiots are thinking. Which is another thing that made me think, that sounds like our crew. That sounds like our crew. Frankie might be part of our crew. In the future, obviously. But the word around town is that the HQ is being guarded by the Gali Law, the best of the Gali Law. They're lined up, they're sitting outside Iceberg's room to protect him, and they're ready for go time. Iceberg says they're making too big of a fuss, they shouldn't worry about him, and then Khalifa looks at Robin's poster and says, what's the deal with that? And he says, oh, it's better off if you don't know. So mysterious about the origins of Robin and everything that's going on there, because he also says that is a demon. And we know because of some of the things that we see later on that what's going on with her and why he thinks she's a demon, and how that coalesces with the theme that I mentioned earlier of the power, the inherent power, building things for yourself and your pride and all of that, in Tom's backstory and everything. And how that coalesces with what should be allowed to exist. A person or a weapon. Robin being that sort of demon. Should she be allowed to exist, having the knowledge she does? But at the end of this, Luffy, Chopper, Nami, and Zoro plan to infiltrate HQ, and Robin looks on at HQ from a different location, obviously. Now, Frankie wants to get at Luffy, that's the reason he stormed out, so he tells his family his plan. They want to kidnap Usopp because they care about Usopp, and then by doing so, they'd be able to draw him out and then confront Luffy. They'd leave a ransom note for it, and it would all go down like that. Now, the guards are stationed outside Iceberg's room, and they're all ready to fight, and what's interesting is that in the midst of this, we see Luffy, we cut to Luffy, and he goes, okay, we gotta have a plan. We gotta formulate a plan before going in head first. Who is this guy? What has happened to my Luffy? And Zoro reminds them of the stakes here. He's very focused throughout this. He does a great job throughout all of this at kind of the mentality of the crew, because they're at a very fragile point, but he's able to sort of galvanize all of them and be a leader sort of mentally to help Luffy focus, to help tell them, these are the situations, this is what we have to do. Things could be bad, but they could be good as well. And ultimately, our goal here is to find out if Robin is our friend. If she is, we can go from there. If not, we're gonna have to decide on something, but this is what it is. And it's task focus, right? If you've watched Haikyuu or read Haikyuu, excuse me, or just play sports or know things about sports, this is task focus. Just focus on what's in front of you. And Zoro does a great job at this. This is their chance. In the meantime, Iceberg clears the room and tells Polly something in confidence. We don't see what he tells him. And then Polly goes out and leaves 4 people guarding the door. I believe it was Kaku, Lucci, Tilestone, and maybe Lulu? That might have been it, but the tension builds, lots of great atmospheric tension building. The clocks are ticking, the wind, the storm is brewing, we see the waves. It's really good, just natural, organic, non-verbal tension building from Oda. We see Polly opens a safe, and then we cut to Robin, who is infiltrating with someone who has a mask that looks like the Five Nights at Freddy's mask, the bear thing. So there's clearly some sort of plan going on here with her and the masked people and CP9, and they are infiltrating. There's an explosion in the mansion and shit hits the fan, and people in the masks are all over the place and they're infiltrating, and they're clearly going towards Iceberg. They're clearly very confident, and Luffy leaves his friends to go check out the explosion when he sees it. And 2 of CP9 find Polly with looking through this safe at these papers. And they want it, and it's valuable, and that's part of what they need here. The assault continues. We're exposed to a lot of CP9 powers as we see they are not ordinary fighters whatsoever. They are devastatingly strong and skilled. The ones that confront Polly left a ton of bodies in the wake. The invasion is well underway, and I imagine in the anime, if this was done properly, this could have looked phenomenal and sounded phenomenal. And they notably say that they come from the shadows and that they are justice. They have these ideas of justice. And that's another theme that I didn't really bring up at the beginning of the video. Another theme, different ideas of what justice is. It's introduced here. And it's said here that they are undercover intelligence agency Cypher Pole 9 at the employ of the world government. Now, the bear mask guy ate the door fruit, so he can make a door out of any surface. Using this, he goes to Iceberg and he comes with Robin, and he's shot in the shoulder to incapacitate him, stop him from fighting back. And it's explained that the only reason that Iceberg survived last time, the last infiltration, was because they didn't have the location of the blueprints. These papers that Polly seems to be getting from the safe. And doing so, 2 birds with 1 stone, this also pinned the blame on the Straw Hats. Very tactical, very complex plots going on here. I really enjoy it. But through this, Iceberg realizes that they're innocent. The Straw Hats didn't do any of this. Even though they're outlaws, even though all this stuff is happening, they are okay in his book. But the plan that's here is that once they get the plans, or the blueprints from Polly, they can shoot Iceberg and kill him, but they need to make sure that those are secured. And Robin's job is to kill him. And it's interesting, there's a mix of resolved shots, panels of Robin, and some where she looks more hesitant. What I wouldn't have given for some internalization here. But then we see Kaku and Lucci's bodies all bloodied up from the bear guy, the bodies in his wake, which is terrifying, because they are shown to have been very competent, but I mean, you and I both know what the reason behind this, but in the moment, it was very terrifying. The threat was just so immense, it felt so overbearing. Excuse the pun. But meanwhile, Luffy looks for a way into the mansion, or the headquarters, and the others look to infiltrate as well. There was some comedy as the crew try to make their way in. Zoro uses the back of his sword, but it's still nearly fatal as Nami's going, just chill out, don't kill everyone. It's pretty funny, and it doesn't break the tone, so I enjoyed that. Luffy makes his way towards it too, and they're both trying to get towards Robin, just to confront her and understand what's going on. And Iceberg says to Robin as he's confronted by her, what a surprise it is to meet you. Now we know here that they had never met before, but he really wanted to. He had heard of her and wanted to meet her. And he says that he needs to kill her before she can destroy the world. Now, excuse me for looking at my notes for a second, a little bit more than I usually do, but I do want to get this right. So he reveals that searching for the poneglyph messages is forbidden due to the threat they pose. They have the secrets to weapons and mysteries and things that are so powerful that if in the wrong hands, they can destroy the entire world, which then keys you into and integrates with the theme of wielding this sort of power No matter who wields it, is it still evil on its own, or can it depend on the context? It's then revealed that Robin is the only person who can decipher the poneglyphs, which is why she had such a high bounty, because of her value in that way. Now, I thought it was because of what she did with those 6 ships that blew up or whatever. It seems to just be this. Though I do want to know more about those ships. Maybe it was both? I don't know. But either way, Iceberg surmises that Robin wants to destroy the world, deciphering the poneglyphs to resurrect these ancient weapons. I do remember that something was said about a weapon maybe named Poseidon before. I think that was the case. Correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, don't spoil, but I think that was the case. Either way, Iceberg is terrified of these weapons and doesn't want them to be brought forth because of the evil and the destruction they could bring to the world, even if Robin doesn't intend to do anything with them. She says, "You have no right to tell me, to judge me this way, and to tell me how to research history. I don't want to do anything with these weapons. I just want to understand the world more." And Iceberg straight up says, like, it doesn't matter what your intent is. Their very existence and your very existence is a blight upon the world. And, you know, I like Iceberg a lot. I think he's a good character. I think he's very solid, but here, I think he's in the wrong for thinking this way. I don't know how Oda will conclude for sure, but like I alluded to, I think it'll end up being similar to what Tom says in the flashback story that we won't get to this video, unfortunately. He doesn't want to awaken the evils of the past, and he doesn't want them to exist at all. Ultimately, I think that Robin is okay in knowing and having this knowledge, because I don't think she wants to wield it for bad purposes, and I think it is possible to have immense power and use it properly. Obviously, it doesn't always turn out right, but it can. It absolutely can. I think she can use this for good rather than harm, or secrets, and learning more about the world and not do it in a harmful way. Iceberg then ultimately confirms that he is in possession of the blueprints for Pluton, which all the way back in Alabasta, Sir Crocodile was looking for. So again, it shows Oda's ability to stagger plot points and bring them in and, you know, properly execute them 150, nearly 200 chapters down the line or whatever it was. Now, the Pluton was a warship so powerful that they needed an opposing force to sort of neutralize it, if it ever came to that. Now, Tom, who is someone that entrusted the blueprints to Iceberg, feared the potential, the dark potential of a little girl who escaped the O'Hara incident from 20 years ago and feared that she shared the same ideals as those from O'Hara. The demons of O'Hara, it said. What? I have no idea what this means, but she escaped some sort of incident in a place called O'Hara? I think it's a place called O'Hara. The demons of O'Hara. What are those ideals? Why would she share them? Why is he so scared of them? I need this backstory. I need to understand what happened. But she grimaces at that when he says that, and is that in disagreement, or is it trauma? She clearly survived some horrible event, and that may be what caused her to be looking at these sorts of things with such pain. She's always hated things to do with her past. She's grimaced at the fact of the 6 ships being taken down and any mention of her past, so I think this all integrates. And I don't think she wants to use these things for evil, but to Iceberg it doesn't matter. Their pure existence is evil. But then it's also revealed that Iceberg has given Polly fake blueprints. His blueprints are fake, so no matter what they do, they won't be able to get the real ones. At least not through their current means, so he kind of outsmarted them a little bit here. Paulie is bleeding, defending, he's being very honorable to the job that he was set out to do, but they're fake. And he kind of taunts the masked men for them being fake, telling them it's futile. And they're frustrated, but they say, this guy knows too much, so he has to die. But then at the same time, Luffy blasts in the wall in this beautiful, beautiful moment. Like, that is Luffy, right? That simplistic nature of his, just blasting through walls, doing what he needs to do to carry out his duty, his self-imposed duty. He wants to get to Robin. He doesn't care what's going on with these plots at the moment, but what he does, just through being who he is, totally spits in the face of these plots. Very cool thematically. And he tells the masked men, give Robin back. But then Luffy and Paulie are essentially trapped by one of the members' powers. One of the members of CP9 has some sort of thing that'll tie them down. And they agree that they need to talk at Iceberg's room to understand how to proceed since they don't have the blueprints. Now, Paulie and Luffy have this kind of bro moment where they both agree that they need to fight for their respective goals. Paulie for Iceberg, Luffy for Robin. And then we get a reveal for CP9 as the masks are taken off and we get this huge twist as we see that it's kind of confirmed as the pigeon with the tie Hattori lands on the bull mask person, one of the ones from CP9 who had a bull mask, and the mask is taken off, and that was Lucci. Kaku has this skull mask, which he takes off. Bluno, the bartender, had the Five Nights at Freddy's bear mask, and Khalifa was behind the last mask as well. So they were all traitors. They're all undercover government agents acting for their idea of justice, who for 5 years had been working under Iceberg in their respective positions. They lived a lie this entire time, but they have no emotional or sentimental attachment to it, seemingly, and they are just coldly professional, and they say, tell us where the Pluton blueprints are, they need them. And I was shocked at this. This was incredible. It's such a crazy plot that they did this for so many years, and they're nonetheless so committed to doing what they need to do, and they have such power as well. They're just so strong. It immediately gives this aura of impressiveness and oppressiveness and darkness around them just through what they were able to accomplish, just through what they were able to do. It's almost like a meritocratic aura around them, like they earned this atmosphere of impressiveness, and that in itself makes them inherently good antagonists just right off the bat for me. This is immense commitment to the cause, immense just what they just give up 5 years of their life to do this, which really tells you about the dedication, and maybe from the higher ups of how they're being directed, there might be this iron rule for this covert group, CP9. But Bluno was the bar owner, Khalifa was the right-hand secretary of Iceberg, Lucci and Kaku were disguised as shipwrights for Dock 1, and it's revealed here that their plans are essentially to get rid of all the potential for the ancient weapons, the Pluton, all that stuff, to essentially just snuff it out and put an end to this age of pirates and bring forth their idea of justice, this new era of justice. They essentially sleuth out that Iceberg would no doubt have the real blueprints with him as well. There's a big, long, smart, clever explanation for it, but that's getting down to brass tacks. That's essentially it. They say, Iceberg, you definitely still have the blueprints, or the Pluton plans, and maybe not with you, but you know where they are. And the fakes are signed by Tom's workers, Tom, Iceberg, and a man named Cutty Flam. So these 3 people must have been involved in the original plans, which they are interested in getting, and they say that Cutty Flam was declared dead 8 years ago, but they remember someone who arrived 4 years prior to the docks and to talk to Iceberg. And this person named himself only once. They believe this person is Cutty Flam, and who this person ends up being is Frankie. So Frankie has much more plot relevance than maybe I initially assumed, and he seems to maybe have the blueprints with him or have put them somewhere. That could potentially be where he went during those chapters earlier on, not sure. But either way, it seems like Frankie has been entrusted with these blueprints. And this whole time, Kaku is monitoring Iceberg's pulse, and he, through his pulse, is able to understand that what they say here is true. And CP9 get all this information, and as they're about to scram and get out of there, Luffy breaks in, and so do Polly, Zoro, Nami, and Chopper. This beautiful spread, beautifully laid out as Luffy comes in through the walls, coming from the right, I believe. You see the other Straw Hats kind of in the background rushing in, and then you have CP9 kind of in the middle of all of it. It's beautifully laid out, and I think, again, an encapsulation of who Luffy is. And Luffy confronts Robin, yelling like there she is. And Iceberg calls Polly an idiot for not running away, despite what he told them to do. And the Straw Hats and Polly see the 4 people and see what happened here, this betrayal sort of thing, but it obviously hits Polly the most, and he is noticeably, visibly affected by this betrayal. And Lucci kind of does a little bit of a Spark Notes explanation to Polly, saying, yeah, I know this might be a lot to take in, but to prove to you that we are who we say we are and that all this is true, how about I bash in Iceberg's face? Will that prove it to you? Like, holy shit. Lucci immediately establishes himself as someone very menacing, the ringleader kind of CP9, very cold, very detached, unemotional, just a cool customer in the worst sort of way, and this crazy ominous threat. He is just this unbelievable menace, and I really buy into him. You know, he doesn't have tons of huge thematics associated with him at the moment, but he is just very simply an impressive, smart, clever, strong, deceptive antagonist with tons of plot importance and tons of weight and menace behind him. And I was told by someone in chat that in the anime, it was made more clear that the bird did all the talking. The bird did all the talking for Lucci. Hattori did all the talking for him. In a certain voice, obviously, with the voice acting. And while Lucci was in the bull mask, he had a different voice. Now, you wouldn't recognize him because he didn't talk at all in the anime with that voice, with the voice actor, up until that point. So it's really clever use of the voice actor and sound design in the anime, and it really kind of nails home Lucci did not talk for 5 years. The commitment, unbelievable. He incapacitates Polly, and it's sort of said to the audience or the readers here that the CP9 all have these unbelievable individual superhuman powers, these 6 powers that give them all sorts of different skills that they've honed to perfection, essentially, to become as strong as they become. And these are named Rokushiki. Lucci attacks Luffy and kind of hits him in the neck, and it doesn't kill him because of his rubber body, which he comments upon. And in the midst of all of this chaos, Chopper, poor boy, asks Robin, why did you leave us? And Robin straight up says that I left you because I had to achieve a dream of mine that could not be achieved while I was with you. If I stay, my wish will not be fulfilled. Total contrast to everyone else on the crew who is there to have their dreams fulfilled. Really interesting. So we still don't know the specifics going on here, but this arc so far, up until this point, has had so many interesting things. Lots of great stuff. What is this dream that needs to be fulfilled, this wish? How did she come to learn about the poneglyphs? How did she come to decipher them? How did she get in with CP9? What is the reasoning here? I just want more and more details. I want the Robin backstory. Ohara? Like, holy shit. But then the rest of the Galila company, or I guess CP9, tells them that this headquarters will be engulfed in flames in 2 minutes, and they're about to pin them down for them to die here before they make their escape. And in this moment, Zoro looks at Luffy and he says, looks like Robin isn't with us, and Luffy refuses to believe it. And it's here where you really think, his ideals here, his faith in his friends, is being tested to the absolute limit. Is this well-placed faith? Or is he being just foolish? Is he being too stubborn? He doesn't buy it. Is he being desperate? Either way, I think it'll lead to a really great development for Luffy. It'll show that either his faith is never misplaced, has never been misplaced up until now, or it will totally shake him to its core because Robin will betray them. I assume it'll be the first one. I think it's well-placed faith, but at the moment I just don't know. But Luffy tells Robin, I don't care, I'm not gonna let you leave like this. He has that immense faith continuously. And then Iceberg, totally beat up, says that he will not let Robin go, staying true to his conviction and ideals. And in the middle of this whole conflict, Zoro sees Kaku, which is interesting because he last saw him on the ship, and Kaku ultimately ends up telling him, you know what, I did lie, this was all a ruse, but I was not lying about your ship. Your ship is still inoperable. And what's interesting is right before this, Zoro says, oh, so you betrayed these people. Was the stuff about the ship a lie too? He reaches out, he's grasping for straws almost, reaching out for some hope that the Mary will be okay, which is very sad. But then Kaku kind of dashes that hope and says, no, I was being honest, the ship is not operable, and I believe him. Something in the way it's said, something in his expressions, I don't think he has any reason to lie about that, especially since they intend to kill them here. Robin escapes through a window, and Luffy is kind of he is up against it against Lucci, and Lucci explains that CP9 have been training since their youth to master these skills. They are on a level unlike anything the crew can possibly imagine. They were always sent out on extreme missions. They have honed their skills to perfection. They're elite, and they have physical abilities that are unrivaled. And as the fire is about to start, Lucci begins transforming into this animalistic, cat-like, this huge monster, and it shocks everyone here. And in the middle of this, I was thinking of Polly. His entire world has been turned upside down. What he viewed as his family, his bonds, have totally betrayed him. And we get into that in the next chapter, the last chapter for this video that I'm going to talk about in 349. As Polly says to him, I'm skipping ahead a tiny bit, he says to them, I still believe, I deep down still think of you guys as comrades. And Lucci says, the feeling is not mutual. What a cold customer. Polly has been shown evidence that his faith in his crewmates, in his old comrades, may be, misplaced. Maybe they just are these cold customers that just don't give a shit about him. That it was all just a job. Maybe that's just them. I would reckon that that is the case. They had this immense commitment to this cause, and they carried it out, and they're done. Their bonds they seem to be fake. But I don't think that's the case at all with Luffy and Robin. With Luffy's crew, the Straw Hats, and Robin. That's not the case with Usopp either. Both of them leave, but you can tell there's more to it, and their hearts are still with the crew. I 100% believe that. But very quickly here, let me just read out the powers of the Rokushiki, which were sent to me. The Tekai allows the user's body to be reinforced by steel, hardening their defense. The Shigan allows the user to pierce flesh with their finger. Geppo allows the user to achieve a form of flight by kicking the air. Kamiye allows the user to effortlessly dodge attacks while their body resembles a piece of paper. Soru allows the user to dodge anything at an extreme speed, and Rankyaku allows the user to kick the air to create a blade-like cutting attack. That was sent to me in a DM from a Twitch sub, I believe, or a patron. No, it was a patron. So thank you for that. And those are extreme, immense physical abilities wielded and perfected through years and years of practice. And not only that, but Lucci transforms into this animal using a zone fruit, which heightens physical abilities, especially for a carnivorous animal, which is what he is here, this sort of, leopard. This leopard version, so it heightens his physical abilities even more when he was already a physical specimen due to his training. So he is just right up there in terms of strength, probably the strongest thing they've faced so far, I would say without a doubt. But Headquarters is on fire and he transforms into this, and he just impales Luffy. Zoro's down for the count, Chopper's out, Nami as well, Headquarters begins collapsing. Lucci was able to impale Luffy despite his rubber nature because of all his enhanced physical abilities and his claws and everything. Polly tries to get Iceberg out, where it's a beautiful little scene. You know, he's lost almost all of his relationships and bonds that we see, but he still has Iceberg, and he's willing to put himself out there, put his life at risk to save his dear friend. It's very emotional. Polly is one of the best new characters in the arc. Iceberg tells him to save himself, and he says hell no. The Straw Hats are then tossed into the sea, scattered all over Water 7 and the surrounding water as well. And this is just a big defeat for the Straw Hats, as Oda once again lays the groundwork, saying, this is what the enemy is like. What are you gonna do about it? In the past, they've taken up the mantle, they've approached the challenge with gusto, and they've been able to bounce back relatively quickly. But this is beyond anything else. Not only have they been defeated totally and utterly, but Robin has left them. They don't know exactly what's going on with them, and their confidence is shaken in that. Usopp has left them. The Going Merry, the representation, the ship, the symbol of their crew, is broken. They have never been in more dire straits, and so on top of that, they've been defeated so soundly. And the Aqua Laguna is coming as well. So how exactly will they bounce back from this? We shall see. Outside the headquarters, which is burning, the public are just desperate to ensure that Iceberg is safe, and they really hope that everything's okay with the people guarding him. About that, someone spots Nami, who's unconscious just outside the building, and they realize that she's one of the Straw Hats, which is not good, no bueno, especially given the reputation that they have as outlaws right now. Inside the headquarters, engulfed in flames, is Polly and Iceberg tied up to one another, just essentially waiting to be killed. And we then cut to the CP9 members looking on from a rooftop above at the fire in this beautiful spread. The shadowing, the boldness, the contrast with the fire and their silhouettes outlined against it, amazing. As Lucci talks about, there's no one here who will be able to witness what happened here. No one can confirm the truth. You didn't really finish the job, my dude. Polly and Iceberg will be okay. They were not killed. The Straw Hats were not killed. They were not properly disposed of. So a bit odd that he says it with such certainty despite not confirming that any of them are actually dead, but that is something that tends to happen sometimes with fiction, so not a big deal. And Lucci says something very interesting, which is an ordinary citizen should never defy something as big as the government. The common man should not stand up against the government. We are justice. We are carrying out justice, and do not interfere, because what we say is automatically, obviously right? And then he also says that the next thing they have to do is retrieve the proper blueprints that were entrusted from Tom to, ultimately, Frankie. But the CP9 through these events are established right away as a fearsome antagonist group. I buy into them right away. I think they're the best group so far. Interesting, in the last episode, we were talking about antagonistic groups. This is the best one so far, and they haven't even properly been fleshed out. They haven't even fulfilled their full plot purpose. But all that I said, they are so clearly above and beyond anything the crew has faced so far, in terms of abilities and smarts and commitment to their cause and ideals. They clearly have ideas of what justice is, that are in large contrast to what we believe, or what the crew believe, but nonetheless they fight tooth and nail for it, and they are unbelievably serious. And Lucci, as the ringleader, as this figurehead, is amazingly impressive. I buy into him immediately. But that ends all the chapters I'm going to be talking about for this video. I apologize. As you can no doubt tell about the way I was talking about this arc, I have right up until the end of the flashback, at least with Frankie, Iceberg, Tom, and all that, because I alluded to it in the themes there when talking about them in the introduction. But we'll talk about that in the next video. This is the cutoff point, the halfway point more or less, for the arc that was decided by my mods, and I think it's a great spot to stop. So I apologize that despite me clearly knowing what happens in the backstory, I'm not going to be talking about it this video, but I think in the long term, that's the best thing to do here. But I've talked about it a little bit, so hopefully that's a decent taster. But what can I say about this arc so far? Best start to an arc by far. It is, like I said, so dense, so consistently go, go, go. The pacing is so tight. It's just everything you want it to be for such a dramatic thriller arc with so much emotional character moments and so much drama and plot intrigue with regards to the poneglyphs and the Pluton, the blueprints, and the lore of the series and the world building. Water 7, such a great setting. The Robin focus, the Usopp focus, the new characters are all great, this antagonist group, so much potential. The potential for a new crewmate is an enticing hook as well, and I'm so sure that Usopp and Robin will return to the Straw Hats. They're gonna return back to the crew, and I'm also less than sure, but if I had to guess who the next crewmate would be, I would assume Frankie, given his role in the story, and especially with the backstory. So not really going out on a limb, those aren't some huge predictions, but that's just what I'm thinking at the moment. And the themes introduced of justice, of this power, of perspective, of families being broken apart and the nuances of that, the burden of being captain for Luffy, the nature of Robin and the nuances of her being a demon or whatever. All these themes are introduced and they're done so with tons of quality, and I was thoroughly entertained, thoroughly engaged the entire way through, and the arc has been amazing so far. More than lived up to the hype. Like I said, I don't tend to be influenced by hype. If you guys tell me this is 11 out of 10, I'm not going to be disappointed if I give it a 9 out of 10. But nonetheless, I was aware of this arc's reputation, and it is definitely, I can definitely see why it's beloved. It definitely has the potential to reach, you know, Alabasta Skypiea levels, and in fact, I've been saying this, at the moment, it's probably like my third or fourth favorite arc just through this first half. So I'm so excited to see where it goes. It is so emotional, so great in terms of plot, so many interesting world building details, so many character hooks. I can't wait to cover more of this. Obviously, since I'm in the middle of an arc, I'm not going to make thematic conclusions just yet. I'm not going to be able to do my top characters because I do that at the end of each arc, so won't be doing any of that. But that's about all I gotta say for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining in the Twitch streams. I've had a lot of people in there lately. I think I reached my peak viewers in one of the more recent streams, which is awesome. So I hope you guys are enjoying the streams. Hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Thank you so much for the support. And as always, if you want early access to the next video, which will be the conclusion to this, Water 7 Part 2, you can pledge to my Patreon and you will get early access. You can check out my Twitch if you want to partake in future streams, and like always, you can check out my Discord as well. And once again, just a reminder, if you want your comment to be highlighted in a future video, just use the hashtag AJPiece to be put into a pool from which I could potentially read it in a future video. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I can't wait to talk about Water 7 Part 2. See you next time.